You might not believe what I'm going to tell you about what happened on the Hopi Res back when I was younger, and that's fine. But do take it as a warning, even if you don't believe what happened here. I do think people who come across certain things on the res, they seem to be targeted because they saw something or came across something, while others who have basically lived in ground zero. This is why sometimes in your stories, I see comments where people say, I've been living here all my life, and I never experienced anything like that. That's why I said if you don't believe me, that's fine. I'm just here to share a warning with you. This happened in Second Mesa on the Hopi Res. It happened 19 years ago. I was supposed to go home Sunday evening, but my mother and sister were telling me to stay another night and to go home at 4 in the morning. That way I can make it to work on time back in the valley. My mother wakes me up at 3:30 a.m. and I left at 4:10. I took the road that went through Hopi lands and came out by Flagstaff in Second Mesa. As I passed the bridge and I went around the curve and started driving up the hill, that's when I saw something on the side of the road, still at a distance. As I get closer, it looks like something big. It was standing on the left side. I turned my high beams on, and as I started getting closer, right before I passed it, I actually turned my head to look at it. It was pretty dark, and it had feathers all over it, like a bird. It then started walking towards the car. As I was still slowing down, that's when I saw it moving towards the car. So I stepped on it and passed it. Don't stop, don't look, don't pay attention. I even put my left hand on my face. That way I couldn't see anything from the corner of my eye. Not to mention, I was the only one on the road. Here's the creepy part, and I swear, I'm not making any of this up. I guess I must have blacked out or something, because I passed my turn and kept driving, because apparently I went up to Mesa, which I don't remember driving that way. As I was going down the other side of Mesa, that's when I woke up. Not only that, I was driving fast, doing about 100. I screamed and slowed down. I started breathing really hard, and my hands were shaking at this point. After I calmed down, I kept going, but it was weird. It was like one moment I'm passing through whatever that thing was on the side of the road, and the next moment I'm waking up going about 100. Nothing else happened on the way back, but I was definitely creeped out. And about 1 week later, I had a car accident. I hit the side window, and my face was all bruised up. Weeks went by, and I told my mom's neighbor, and she told me that she's heard about something flying around at night on the Hopi Res. I really don't think it was a Skinwalker, because of someone that I talked to. I won't mention his name, it'll stay anonymous, but he basically said that most likely what happened is that there was a ceremony going on around that time or day, that maybe the figure that I saw was a person, and he was trying to warn me to turn back around. And instead of listening, I actually stepped on it. He said that some ceremonies on the Hopi Res are done on certain times of the year, to the point where they close off highways. In one of them, they call back all the ones who have died, to the point where even some officers see some weird things as well. Of course, this happens when they're out on patrol. It's so serious that even outsiders have to leave the night. He told me that you can tell when ceremonies are going on in the Hopi Res because of how the dogs start barking. So don't drive at night, and just because you see something on the side of the road at night doesn't mean that it's a Skinwalker. Sometimes you just need to mind your business and just stay indoors at night. I'm not telling you to stop or anything if you see something at night. I'm just telling you to avoid the night, especially if you live out here on the res. So I live in North Canada. Up north, my backyard basically ends with a thick forest. I have ventured out in the woods ever since I was a kid, so I know about a 5-mile radius. I have gone around, maybe went camping for a night once or twice. I haven't found anything too scary, just carcasses and bones and any other shit you can find in some forest. Only once did I ever think of something you don't just come across. A circle, or stomped out grass. Like, not the feeling of the circle was stomped out, only the outline. And it was dotted too. It must have taken a long time, since the snow was out of the circle too. Almost like if someone took the time to actually do it. I was only around 12, so I didn't really think too much of it. The snow eventually covered it up, and I forgot about it. This year though, I think I found something related. I am 23 now, and I still live here. My father died some years ago in a car accident, and my mom now lives in some elderly home for disabled. She never fully recovered after losing my father. I have 2 siblings, so it's always just me and my cats. Now on to the incident. I was out in the woods as always. I go out as much as I can. I guess to relieve stress or some good old-fashioned memories. I'm not sure. It just clears my mind and I can forget about the fucks of life. I may have ventured a bit further than I always do, and my mind was in a dark place at that time. Let me just say that I don't have much luck with the ladies or friends, and I guess I was a bit depressed. It was still early afternoon, and there was quite some light even in this dense forest. Admiring the scenery, I just realized that I don't really know where I'm at. Sure, I know the general direction I came from, but I have never been to this area. I was just about to turn around when I saw something that brought back memories of that circle. The snow was gone, and there were stomp marks on the ground. I went on to investigate. I realized that it couldn't have been the same circle. It was much further than I would have gone as a kid. But how did it get there? The closest neighbor is miles away. It was on a clearing, so I thought it was some landmark for airplanes. I know it sounds crazy, but I was alright with my theory back then. I stayed there for like 10 minutes, but since there wasn't anything interesting, I left it to that and went back home. I remember having some trouble finding my usual way back, but I got home before dinner time. I fed my cats and went to sleep. Nothing really interesting happened for weeks. My problem is that I have nothing to do. On weekdays I work. On weekends I went hiking. I've been doing it for years, but just out of nowhere, I got bored of it. I couldn't really tell why, so I started thinking about things to do. Maybe I should write a book. Turns out it was a shitty idea. It's not that I'm bad at writing, but I had nothing to write about. I didn't want to be like most fantasy writers, but dramas and crime stories seemed boring to me. Apparently, my only escape from writer's block was, who would have thought, the damn forest. So there I was again in the woods, with not a single goal in mind. I just continue on. Maybe I should draw a map and make money from it. I'm pretty sure satellite images can penetrate the leaves. Now, why would anyone need a map of this forest? I wasn't sure. There were no ruins or buildings or anything. Just a bunch of woods and trees. Nevertheless, I took on this project. Some months passed and I had a pretty accurate map of the radius. At least the part that I knew like the back of my hand. I got so caught up in it that I wanted more. And so my new idea was camping out on the edges of the map and then do some exploring. This way, the map would quickly expand. The pattern was as follows. I pack up my stuff and choose one of my trails. I camp on a clearing as close to the unexplored habitat that I just can. I inspect the way that I came through on the map. I do some fixing if I need to, do some more exploring, but always get back to camp before sundown. Make sure no animals will start fucking with me, and watch the fire. I do some sketches on the area that I explore, and I repeat until the map was good enough. Aside from encounters with wolves and bear ones, nothing too extreme happened. I always brought my shotgun with me, so I felt pretty safe. Now one night, when I was laying in my tent, trying to get some sleep, I heard it. A soft, thumping sound. Now, since I roamed this forest for about 15 years, I knew just about every sound. This one was new, so much that there was no way I wouldn't see what made it. Lucky for me, and a full moon. I grabbed my gun and a flashlight, but I didn't turn it on. I didn't want to scare whatever I might find. I also read once that hunters climb trees to look around, so I went as close as I felt safe, and I started climbing. I didn't see what made the sound from the ground, but once I got up, I had a clear view, and I almost crapped my pants. There were some naked people, standing in a perfect circle, stomping on the snow. My first reaction was to scream, but I stopped myself. I was sure that if I did, my life would most likely end. I didn't even dare to move as some of them were facing my general direction. I couldn't see their eyes, but I was pretty sure that they could see me. So I stayed on the tree for the rest of the night, just watching them. After accepting my situation, I found that I was actually inspecting them. They didn't do anything other than stomping on the ground. It was so cold that I was shaking, but they weren't. Not even when the wind was storming through the forest. Not even when the snow started falling. I didn't even notice that the moonlight had faded, but I could see them. At this point, I'm pretty sure that something was wrong with them, up until it started snowing. I have never been out in a storm, and I don't plan on staying out here. I had to move. If I don't, I would freeze to death. And if they came after me, I still had my shotgun, so I jumped down and ran. To be more accurate, my face planted the snow. Then, I power crawled to my tent. Through some sheer luck, I tell you. I got back to my tent. I started a fire. It was hard in the snowfall, but the charcoal was still hot. But I was able to live and die another day. For the next month, I stayed out of the forest. I even thought about ditching the map project. But for some reason, instead of doing that, I just marked about where I had seen them. After thinking a bit, I marked the other circle too. I tried recalling the very first time that I had seen it, but I couldn't remember. It must have been way closer though, so I just made a big circle, guessing around what area it was. I had no idea what I saw and who they were, but I found myself wanting to go see them again. I guess curiosity was getting the best of me. The map had a new purpose now, and so did I. I had to know. So I started going out in the forest again. I always camped near the two circles, but I didn't see them or hear them again. Some nights I thought I did, but when I got up to find them, the sound would stop. I was sure I was just hallucinating or something. I even lost sleep over this, so my routine had to change. Sleep during the day and go out to the forest at night. I knew that it was dangerous, but I had just recently lost my mom as well. I had no friends, no girlfriend, no close relatives, just me in the forest, so I guess I didn't have anything to lose. After about a week of this and not finding them, I figured out that they associate with the moon cycles. I have seen them during the full moon, and looking back at the date, my previous circle finding was after a full moon, so I ended up making a moon calendar. I did have internet access, and even tried looking up these secret cults or naked people marching in place in a circle, not trying to miss them if my theory wasn't right. I explored the forest every night. I even stood out camping for a few days. There were plenty of mice in my house, so I knew my cats would be alright. Then came the big night. I went deep in the woods as far as I felt safe, and I stood up all night. The moon wasn't out this time, but it wasn't snowing. I was worried that I would miss them. Thinking about that night still scared me, but now I had a feeling that they are the prey. and I am the hunter. Maybe half the night passed and nothing. I was so fucking curious that I left my tent. I'm not sure why. I just started walking again. I had lost all hope. But then, finally, and it was coming from close by, but it was all weird, like it didn't fade in. It just started out of the blue. The sound was there, and it was much louder than before. I must have been closer. The moon was still under a cover of clouds, so it was pitch black. I turned on my flashlight. I pointed at the ground, and slowly upwards in the distance. What I saw made me lose my shit. About 20 yards from me, they were there, and there was not a tree, not a bush between us. They must have seen me. There was no fucking way they didn't. I mean, I had a flashlight, but I was so shocked that not a sound came out of me. I couldn't even turn off the flashlight. They were just stomping on the ground. But this time, it looked like there were some women there. And being so close, I started to hear something. They were talking. I even saw each person's mouth moving in the light. But it was all wrong. They were talking, but not to one another. They were just repeating some sort of gibberish over and over again, not even in a pattern. Most of them were saying the same thing. I had no idea how long I stood there. I just couldn't get myself to move. Obviously, they knew I was there. I guess they didn't mind it. I'm sure if I was to make any sort of movement, it would bring death to me. I admit, I was scared. I didn't want to get any closer. Even though I was curious, I know better than to fuck with anything that they were doing. 10 minutes passed, 20, 30, an hour, and they were just doing the same thing. Finally, I decided to go back. I marked a circle on my map and got back to my tent, and I went home right away. I was right. They appeared around the full moon. With this discovery, I changed my routine yet again. I stayed home and worked between full moons. Months would pass by, and every time that I saw them, there were different people there, also saying different things, and even how they moved. For example, sometimes there were more than one circle. Two of the people would change places, then in the other, they didn't stop. They would just stand there, looking straight ahead. Then came a very big event, a lunar eclipse, and I'm not referring to a new moon. New moons didn't mean anything to them. I never found anything during that, but a lunar eclipse, maybe that would have an effect on them. There was an area in my map that I had marked where I had seen the most of them, so I planned on going there. Sadly, one of my cats had died. I didn't count it related to the circles though. She was just very old. I had that cat ever since I can remember, so I was sad. Nevertheless, I went out that night. I was excited. I just couldn't sit in one place. I didn't even care about the moon. I shined my flashlight all over the forest. I guess they didn't really care about me being there, because they didn't pay attention to me. I finally got to the area that I had marked. As I got closer, I could hear the thumping sound, but it sounded a bit different. It seemed way louder and out of rhythm. When I finally got there, I realized that there were more circles. Not one, but at least 5 of them. I could have lost count, but I guess seeing so many of them sort of freaked me out. Never before did I think that there were this many of them. The largest circle had about 20 of them. But now, there could have been about 70, 80. I climbed the nearest tree, and just like many weeks ago, I looked around. There were about 5 circles, spread all over the place. 2 of them were right next to each other. I looked up to the moon, and it was just a few minutes until the lunar eclipse. The thumping was loud now. I even found myself tapping the rhythm on the tree. But what happened next made me never come back. It was about to happen. The moon completely vanished, and with it, every person in every circle just started screaming. Now I was fucking scared. I dropped my flashlight, and I didn't care for it. What I cared about was what the falling light showed me. Every single person turned their face towards me, still screaming, and started fucking running to my tree. Holy fuck, I knew I was gonna die. There was no way that I would survive. I still had my shotgun, but the bullets were in the camp. I only had 2 rounds loaded, 2 shots, and that was it. The very moment that I saw one underneath the tree, I fired. Maybe I can kill one and scare away the others. But my plan only half worked. The one that I shot did die, but the others didn't give a fuck. Some of them even started eating the body. I was fucked. Lucky for me, they couldn't climb the tree, but in return, they all started shaking the tree. They're all still screaming at this fucking point. I shot another round, but I missed completely. Out of desperation, I threw down my gun at them and I tried climbing higher. The lunar eclipse was long gone, and they still didn't fucking disappear. In my clouded mind, an escape plan popped up in my head. I could jump the treetops to home and call the police. I didn't know what I would tell them, or even how I would go back inside my home with these freaks following me. Oh well, fuck it, what option do I have? Obviously, after a second jump or so, I fucking fell. When I did, I knew I was gonna die. They just stood there, around the tree that I was originally on, still screaming, and just looking at me. Maybe they lost me when I jumped, and were satisfied that I was leaving. I had no idea. I still saw them in the light of my flashlight, but I didn't care. I got up and ran. I ran like if these demons out of hell still chased me. I was about 3 miles from home. I ran all the way back. By the time that I got home, it was basically early morning. I got in and locked the door. I didn't even call the police. And I never went back, at least that deep into the forest. This whole experience still scares the living shit out of me. I'm sure that if they somehow were able to track me down, I would die. What makes it even worse is that about a month later, I found my cat, dead. Somebody had hanged him in a tree nearby. Was it those people who I saw? Maybe. But then I also started getting some creepy feelings. Not that it was true, but for some reason, I felt like at night, people would be standing outside my window, looking in. I put the home up for sale and decided to move away from those creeps who live out here. My grandma told me this when I was about 13. She said when she was with her second husband, he started drinking and going to the local bar a lot. So much so that when he got paid at the end of the week, he would go straight to the bar. One night, she was fed up because the kids were hungry, and he hadn't came home, but she knew where he was. So she walked to a nearby neighbor's home, and she asked her friend to drive her to the bar to go confront him. She lived in a very small community at that time, so there wasn't that many houses or even businesses around back then. And so they go. They pull into the parking lot, and the bar only had one light above the door. And that's when they noticed another woman standing just outside the light, just pacing back and forth. Grandma said that she had long, black straight hair, and she was wearing a long light-colored dress, and she just kept her head down, looking down at the ground. That's when she and her friend thought, uh-oh, somebody else's husband is in there too. The friend called out to her, but she wouldn't respond. She called out again, and that's when the long-haired woman started to come towards the car. Grandma's friend was asking her if she was alright, but she just kept her head down, and they couldn't see her face. So they just got the feeling that maybe she was sad or crying. She was about halfway to them, and my grandma looked towards the ground to see what she was looking at. And when she did, she noticed that she didn't have any feet. She seemed to be floating to them. That's when Grandma started screaming, but her friend didn't know what was going on. Grandma was able to get the words out. No feet. Her friend finally saw what Grandma saw. Both of them started screaming, and the long-haired lady made it to the car. She leaned down and looked in. Grandma said that she didn't have any eyes. But that's when they got the hell out of there. She said she can't remember the drive home, only that they got home quickly. And when her husband got home, she beat the hell out of him and left with the kids. This is a story that my father has told me a few times. My dad is a logger, one who operates a tree saw, which is basically a giant machine that is capable of cutting down massive trees and then cutting them down to a specific size, which means that he spends a lot of time alone in the deep forest. The way my dad's logging crew was set up, he would be told where he's supposed to cut down trees. He would then go do it, and then he would get paid based on the amount of trees he cut, not on how long it took him. So my dad used to work around 16 to 20 hour days in order to get done as quick as possible, and then the rest of the crew would come clean up the trees and ship them to the mill. He used to work around 50% of the time alone, and the remaining time would be spent with another tree saw operator named Renee. They would use radios to communicate back and forth when they were working together. This is relevant down the line. Sorry for all the backstory, but this is where everything starts. My dad and Renee were putting on a new job site, and we're about 10 days in, and everything was going as planned. But then they started hearing some weird chitter chatter over the radio that was such poor quality, and they would adjust the radio channel to some other one, but it would follow them. As they went through the job and went further up the mountain, the words from the radio slowly became more understandable. Both of them agreed based on the small parts of the conversations that they could hear that something was wrong. They also started finding weird containers all over the place and signs that people had been there. People should not have been here. This was a 2.5 hour drive up a mountain, and they had spent about 3 weeks clearing out the road so that the trucks and equipment could make it up. So then they realized that they're in a very secluded area with people who shouldn't be there. And the worst part is that they aren't scheduled to leave for about another week. They would only leave to refuel the fuel truck with gas for the machines. They would also buy supplies and sleep in campers. One day, Renee comes across a tent, and he calls my dad over. They investigate the tent and find one lone sleeping bag and a duffel bag. They investigate the duffel bag, and they found all sorts of creepy stuff. Well, more like crazy things, and also pictures of people, including rope and some other things. You can most likely guess what they were up to. In the tent, they also find a small amount of food, which included canned goods and an apple, which proves that somebody was in the tent recently because there was no mold on the apple. Now they realize that they're on the mountain alone with some really fucked up person. Renee right away wants to get the fuck out of there, but my dad, being the hardest working person that I ever met, insists that they need to finish the job and then get the fuck out of there. They then decide that they're not going to talk over the radios unless it's an emergency, and see if they can hear something over the radio. They are now in close enough range of whoever has been talking over the radio to hear the conversations between the two men about collecting water and wood for the fire. Nothing abnormal, except for the fact that these guys don't fucking belong here, and that the tent was also theirs. At the end of the workday, my dad hears them on the radio talking about one of them collecting brush for a fire. My dad then hops on the radio and he attempts to communicate with them about what the fuck they're up to. I believe he said something about, "Who are you? And what are you doing here?" After he said this, the conversations between the two men stop, and they never pick up again. That night, Renee wakes my dad up, and he whispers for him to get his gun. Someone is outside. My dad has told me that the first thing that he noticed when he woke up is the quiet shuffling of footsteps. My dad fumbles for his gun, and he finds it. But then he realizes that he doesn't fucking have it loaded, and has little clue where his rounds are. And Renee doesn't have anything, and the thought of calling police doesn't really make sense too much. They hear a jiggle on the doorknob, and it opens. The camper is far enough off the ground to where you had to jump in, and there is no ladder or footstool. It just stays open. And my dad, nor Renee, move. They hear scratching right outside the door though. After about 4 minutes of scratching, my dad can no longer take it, and he nods at Renee. He gets up quietly, and he walks towards the camper door, and the second that he reaches in, he is met with intense pain across his right eye, all the way to his cheek. He has been cut, and he falls out of the camper hitting the ground hard. A man with a knife gets on top of him, and he is soon being kicked on the top of his head by a man behind him. Renee leaps out and is able to get the man off my dad, and then my dad gets up and realizes that the second man without the knife is now running away, and the man with the knife is now scrambling away from Renee, and he starts running alongside the other guy. My dad and Renee get into the truck, and they drive to the nearest hospital in order to treat my dad's cuts and later report the events to the police. They both ended up quitting their jobs. 2 weeks later, as the rest of the logging crew was finishing up the job, one of them was found gagged, bound, raped and murdered, and thrown into a ditch about a mile away from there. And to this day, no one has ever been convicted of these crimes. My dad can also barely see out of his right eye, and the pupil is disfigured, and it looks more like a cat's eye than a human's eye. He suffers from PTSD from these events, and he's never slept a good night since that day. Now, mind you, this took place in 1996. Reading other reports and other stuff that my dad told me is that the man that was abducted, he had hopped out of his machine to go pee, and that's when they got him. The police never investigated what happened on the mountain. They said it wasn't their jurisdiction, and it was also too far away. They only investigated once someone was found dead. Also, my dad doesn't really lie about stuff like this. He also does have a cat's pupil, and I also remember him waking up in the middle of the night, screaming, all throughout my childhood. Maybe you can find something of the stuff that went up there. It happened along the north part of the Idaho-Montana border, if that helps. The people were never arrested for these crimes. Were they arrested for something further down the line? I'm not sure. Another thing that my dad suffers through is that he does have a partner that he sleeps with. However, he has to sleep in different beds because of his night terrors. We hear stories about monsters and some creatures being encountered up in the deep woods. But people can be scarier. Just down the road from where I used to live at, there's about 100 acres of woods that I would go into when I was younger. I would go there just to go riding and camping. One night, I was out driving at around 11:30 p.m. with my girlfriend, and as we were in the area, I decided to show her the woods while we were in the area, as she loves everything to do with nature. Plus, it was summer, so it was an extremely warm night. I left my car with the lights on, pointing towards the trees as we weren't going to go too far in, and it was dark everywhere. We just walked a few steps away from the truck, and the two of us just kind of sat in the back talking, having a smoke, and relaxing. I would be lying if I told you that I wasn't creeped out. I was, but I still didn't want to show it. However, I was keeping an eye on the trees, as I had a feeling that something was just wrong. I heard people describe that feeling of something being off, when in reality, they were in danger, but they just didn't know it yet. But nothing around us was off, but still, I just had that feeling. It felt like every sense of my body was reaching out to me, and my adrenaline was up there, but there wasn't really anything around us. After lighting another cigarette to calm my nerves, I scanned the tree line again. It looked different than before. It was only after staring into the dark that I saw that there was moonlight now, and it was lighting up the grass where it couldn't before. There was also a black shape blocking it. That before I thought was a tree. It creeped me out a bit, especially when all the sounds just stopped and everything went dead silent. And just like that, that disgusting feeling of dread fell over me. That's when I saw something moving in the dark. It looked like something was crawling towards us on all fours. I have seen just about every animal, and it still kept moving towards us, so I knew it was dangerous, since it wasn't hiding itself from us, but just slowly crawling towards us. Not sure if my girlfriend saw it, or maybe I just couldn't look away, but just as it reached the front of my truck, I was able to see it. It got up on two legs, and just sat there, and was just staring at us. I am 6'4", and this thing was about a foot taller than me. Its arms were lanky, basically almost touching the ground, and in the dim light, I could make out the silhouette of its head. It looked to be the shape of a dog. I wasn't able to move as it stared at me, but it was at this point that my girlfriend gasped, which I think broke off whatever was stopping me from thinking logically. I grabbed her by the arm and ran over to the driver's side of my truck. I told her to get in. I slammed the door and tore out of there as fast as I could, both of us too scared to speak about anything. A few hours after, we did talk about what we saw, and we both agreed that it was something supernatural that could basically end us if it was wanting to. We haven't been able to come up with any explanation for what it was, but it has definitely changed the way that I view the woods now, especially when I go camping or hiking now. I think back to that, and I do wonder what it was, and if I will ever see anything like it again. This took place last year, at the beginning of summer. I was with my mom, headed down to my Nana's farm to visit for a weekend. For some context, she lives on a farm way back in the country, right at the foot of a mountain in South Carolina. It's a very secluded area, so the roads are badly maintained and barely wide enough for two cars to pass one another. The houses are also spread out and set far back into the tree line from the road, so there's very little light besides the headlights of a car. So my mom and I are driving, her in the driver's seat, and I was the passenger. It was around 11 p.m., and we're about 15 minutes out from Nana's. We're deep in the woods with the radio down. We come into the stretch of the road in a heavy wooded area, and suddenly, this blur of a creature darts out across the road, right at the edge of our headlights. It was moving pretty good, but both me and my mom were able to get a good look at it, and both agree on what we saw. It was the size of a person, or maybe it was just a bit bigger, but we couldn't make out the head. But we do remember it looking skinny, almost like its rib cage was poking out. The reflection of light made it hard for me to tell color, but my mom said that she remembered it to be dark, and she didn't see any fur, nor any hair. It had long limbs as it moved across the road. It also didn't run the way a dog or horse would, with all four legs. The best way to describe it would, it was using its front limbs to pull itself along, and it was also moving pretty fast, almost like it couldn't walk. However, we both said something along the lines of, "What the hell is that?" as it crossed in front of us. As we got up to where it had crossed, I turned to look at it, just as it got to the other side of the road and out of our headlights. And I swear on my life, it stood up and ran. Not like a dog on its hind legs. It was definitely bipedal. That's when I screamed out that it stood up, and we both started getting nervous. I honestly think that I would have been going crazy if I didn't have somebody else in the car with me. My mom has always been a pretty level-headed person and not superstitious, but she was very nervous, which made me recognize how serious this was. I should also mention that there's been attacks on livestock, horses in the area, around the time that this happened. People were saying that they found wire fences ripped through and their animals attacked. I don't think any died, but if I do remember correctly, there were a few horses that were severely wounded. There have been a few other strange instances in the area, but this was just my personal experience. Remember your roots and the rules. That was her favorite saying. Before I got married and moved out the rest into the city, I remember my grandma telling me during my wedding, which was the last time we spoke, she said, "No matter where you go, sweetie, always respect the traditions. Remember your roots and the rules." And, well, one of the rules that she told me, the one that I forgot and let it slip out of my head, was, whatever you do, never open the door at night if you hear knocking, and never go into a house where someone has died. So the story that I'm going to tell you, it's an experience that I'll never forget, and after seeing what happened, I hope you can learn from my own mistake. So I did keep the traditions and rules in my mind for a long time, and trust me, I stood strong on these beliefs. When me and my husband were house hunting in the city, there were a few houses that we actually liked, but I stood my ground and refused to move into those places because of the background of them, mainly because someone had died there. We eventually did find a house, and after about a decade, with life moving so fast, technology advancing so quick, and everything else going on, my traditional beliefs started to slip away. People do let you down, and life isn't what you expect it to be. I ended up getting divorced and moving back to the res. After I split up with him, he ended up staying in the city. He wasn't actually Navajo. Well, actually he was, but he was born in the city, and so that's where he stayed. I ended up moving back to the res. By this time I had 3 beautiful children. I was lucky and found a house. It was a 2-story house with the master bedroom upstairs and the other 2 rooms downstairs. So it was a pretty big house. I mean, at least for me. I'm sure some of you listening to this might think that's not a big house, but over here in the res, everybody is poor, at least in the area that I was in, including myself. So anyways, I ended up meeting my neighbors, and we started hanging out because they also had kids that were the same age as mine, and we became pretty close. Then one day, randomly, we were hanging out, and my neighbor asked me how I could stay there. I asked her why she was asking that, and she told me that the person who used to live there had died in the house. That's when it clicked as to why she wouldn't come over, and why it was always us going to her place to visit. I did end up asking how the man died, and she said that he drank a lot and died from alcohol. He was the only person who lived in this big house, so no one knew he was dead, and he had apparently been dead for a while, until his family asked for a welfare check. When they found him, his body was decomposing. She asked if anything strange has happened, and I told her no, nothing really. I asked her why she would ask that. She said that a lot of people come and go, but never stay too long there, and that she's also heard stories. I didn't ask because I didn't want to get scared, and she didn't offer to tell me the stories. We just left it at that. So one day it was getting late, and I was getting tired, so we walked back to our place and we were getting ready for bed. That's when I heard a knock on the door. So I went to answer it, and when I opened the door, there was nobody there. This happened a few times. I just thought it was kids playing around. Then one night, it wasn't really nighttime yet, but it was starting to get dark. I heard the same thing. I was too tired to play this game, so I just laid in bed without answering the door. And the next thing you know, somebody was banging their fist on the door, really loud. I got worried, thinking it's an emergency, so I jumped out of bed and ran to the door. It was my friend, and also her husband. They were telling me to get the kids and that I would stay the night with them. I asked them what was going on, and she said, "I'll tell you when you come with us." So I got the kids and a few of our things and left with them. When we got to her place and put the kids to bed, she and her husband sat me down and said that I would stay there with them until I could get someone to smudge and bless the house. I asked why, and she said that they were outside, and they said that they saw the man that had died there come up to the door and walk in. They said they saw the lights upstairs turn on, and he was walking around. I thought they were just trying to scare me, so I went outside to look at my house, and sure enough, the lights were on, and in the distance, it did look like somebody was walking. I told them that I was going to call the police just to make sure it wasn't somebody actually breaking in. They did end up showing up, and I told them what was going on. They ended up going inside to check the house. As I was outside looking, I noticed that the officers stopped right before going in, and they quickly smudged themselves. And that's when it hit me. What my neighbors were telling me was true. See, I watched the house the whole time and never saw anyone leave, so I know the person who was there still had to be in the house. But that's when the officers told me that they went through the whole place and it was empty. And one of the officers told me that they always got calls like this from the same address. They also advised me to get a medicine man to smudge the entire home and even perform a ceremony if needed, especially since my kids and I had been living inside. I was scared, and I asked my friend if I could stay with them for a few days until I got something figured out. Of course, they said yes. I did end up talking to my family, specifically my mom. Of course, she knew a medicine man, and in the next day towards the evening, the medicine man came out to perform a ceremony out in the field behind the house. He included me and my children in the ceremony. I won't go too much into detail because ceremonies are sacred. However, I will say this, the medicine man also went inside the house. He was in there for a few hours. When he finally came out, he told me something that I will never forget. I had broken two very important rules of the res, the same rules that my grandmother had reminded me of. 1. Never move into a place where someone has died. The spirit, or the chide, still dwells there, while the bad, unclean energy stays in that place, and that's dangerous. And 2, never open the door at night when you hear knocking. If you do, you're inviting spirits inside. It might be something trying to make contact. That was my mistake, one that I will never forget again. This happened a while back. I consider myself a little bit more grown now, going back to my traditions, you can say. My great uncle James, or Jim for short, and my grandpa were best friends since they were little kids. This was mostly on account of them being identical twins and spending nearly every day of their lives together until they were about 18. It was the 50s, and tensions were high in Tucker County after the coal mines that had opened near the surface. After the huge fires in the 1910s had mostly dried up, larger coal companies moved in to take advantage of the area's natural resources and make deeper coal mines. Nobody local could really do this due to the lack of industrial drilling technology. So Jim and my grandpa went to work in one of these new super deep coal mines. Now keep in mind that the Appalachian Mountains are some of the oldest mountains on Earth and have existed for 500 million years. They have been more or less undrilled until these large companies came in. It was profitable enough. My grandpa and Jim finally found a steady job, but the mountains themselves didn't seem to like it. Jim tells me it was about 1953 when things started happening. First, it was just a couple of cave-ins, but then everything started dying almost immediately after entering the mines. Birds and small animals around the entrances would just drop dead. Frequently, silicosis cases skyrocketed, but the nation needed coal, and 500 million years worth of compressed carbon-based life could power anything, just about everything at that time. So the mining continued until it couldn't. One day, a big saw that was used to actually obtain the coal was found shattered, broken. This was attributed to a sudden change in temperature. People thought that the fanning system used to circulate the oxygen had malfunctioned, but until the saw was fixed, all the mining had to stop. After 2 weeks, the pay the workers were receiving had also dried up, and my grandpa and Jim decided to take things into their own hands. With 6 other men in tow, they descended into the mine under the disguise that they were mechanics, saying they were mechanics hired to fix the saw. Once they got down to the lowest level, it was chaos. The crow that was brought in, since smaller birds were dying so quickly, crows started going crazy. And not only was the saw broken, the conveyor belts were ripped to shreds. Huge holes were made into the walls, the floor, and the roof of the tunnels, and all the machinery was broken. This couldn't have been attributed to the work of a malfunctioning fan system. Obviously, the party ends up leaving the mine and comes back a day later with pickaxes, guns, and other stuff that could end up being useful in trying to figure out or get rid of whatever was doing this to the equipment. However, on the way down, the elevator got stuck a few feet short of the entrance to the lowest level. Climbing out, the group noticed that the elevator shaft was now blocked off with huge rocks. Nearly all the lights were off and broken, and the equipment was even further mangled. They noticed a set of human-like footprints. The group began to follow them to figure out how these people could have possibly gotten in, when somebody pointed out that their own boots were making much more shadow indentations in the rocky mud. It was at that point when they realized that no common person could have possibly lifted those huge rocks, torn up the conveyor belts, and broken the saw that weighed hundreds of pounds. They also began to notice that there were very large handprints to the side of the tunnel, outside the range of their lamps. Something large and not human was in the mine. They turned back to return to the surface, afraid of whatever was in there with them. But as they ran, the tunnel began to shake, and the 4 men jumped back as a wall of rocks and gravel fell from the roof, separating them from the 2 others, plus Jim and my grandpa. One of them had his leg seriously injured under a large rock, and he had to be carried by the other 3 around to where the other tunnel led to the now blocked off area. In that tunnel, which was longer than most of the others, strip mines led to narrow areas, one of which apparently led out to a crack through which the group could actually get to the trapped man. While entering this tunnel, one of the men became aware of a low rumbling that was gradually increasing in sound. Thinking it was another cave-in, they quickly moved away from the source back towards the elevator, but it seemed to be following them. And just then, something big, wide and hairy bolts around the corner and starts charging at them. The 3 uninjured men whip out their guns and start firing at it. Seconds later, the thing is dead. It had the thumbs of a human, but that's basically where any features of human ended. It looked more like a huge bear than anything. It had 2 deformed eyes that took up almost half of its face, and it was clearly some kind of mutated animal because it was covered in bony, almost tumorous-like things. It was at least 10 feet tall. Its canine teeth were too long, almost about a foot long. Its fur was patchy and light gray, and its pupils were red. All of its limbs were long and stocky, and it seemed to rely on its arms as a second pair of legs. My grandpa and Jim, both of them who were hunters, thought that it was incredible to see something like this. Whatever it was, they took its head and one of its arms as a prize to present to the local police station as evidence that the mine could finally be reopened. Over the course of a few hours, the 8 men were all able to get back to the elevator and eventually return to the surface. My grandfather and Jim showed their kill to the state police, who then quickly confiscated it as scientific evidence. which was enough to satisfy them at the time. Remember, they were young and didn't finish high school, so they were pretty much not educated. The only evidence that this thing ever existed is a black and white photo of my grandpa and Jim, grinning like idiots holding some kind of tusk with the misspelled word, behemoth, that was written on the bottom. I'm not sure if people will believe this, but if I were you, I wouldn't go anywhere close to the Appalachian Mountains, the trail, or any small towns around there. You never know what else was down there that has came out to the surface. When my uncle was younger, he used to attend many ceremonies. He was always curious and wanted to learn a lot. If you didn't know, the spirits, or the Skinwalkers, depending on what your tribe is, they might be known as a different name. Well, he said that during the ceremonies, that's when they show up the most, especially in ceremonies that are held out in the open. Some of these things are drawn to those gatherings, to the energy that is going on when so many people are praying for healing or guidance. He told me that whenever you attend one of the ceremonies, you must be ready for anything. Evil can sneak in, even if everyone has the best intentions. One thing that he stressed over and over was that you should only go to meetings, ceremonies held for people that you know. The tradition teaches us to be careful. If you go to a stranger's meeting, you should always go with a group of people that you trust. You need the help because you never know what might happen. It's really easy for something to go wrong, especially when you're not familiar with anything. And when you're alone, you're even more open for these things to happen. So he said that back then when he was young, he didn't believe in too much of these things. So he was curious, trying to experience as much as he could. That curiosity would get the better of him one night when he said that he attended a meeting he wasn't invited to. It's not that he wasn't invited, he didn't really know anybody there. It was an all-night NAC ceremony out in the middle of nowhere. He didn't know the people there too well but had been encouraged by a friend to join. The ceremony was held in a teepee, and by the time they started, it was pretty much filled up. Before the fire stick was lit, an older woman walked up to the door and asked if she could come in. The family of the patient didn't know who she was, but as it was custom, they went ahead and made room for her. She brought in her gourd box and sat in her spot without much fuss. As the praying began, my uncle noticed that the men next to him started moving around. They started to whisper among themselves about a strange, raw, funky smell coming from the direction of the old woman. It wasn't the smell of sage or mountain tobacco, but it was something else, something that didn't just sit right with them. They were hoping that the smoke from the tobacco would block out the smell, but it just lingered. Despite the discomfort, the service carried on into the night. My uncle was trying to ignore it, focusing instead on the songs and prayers. But as the hours passed, something about the old woman started to seem off. She couldn't sit still. She was just moving her body from side to side. At one point, my uncle said that he saw her leg twist unnaturally, almost like a pretzel. My uncle blinked, thinking that maybe it was the medicine that was affecting him. But then it happened again, and he knew it was the woman. By around 3 in the morning, the singing was going on, and the prayers grew more intense. That's when the old woman started acting really strange. As the roadman began a powerful song, the old woman raised her arm in the air, calling out praises to Jesus and God. But she was doing it in a mocking way, something you don't really hear at one of these ceremonies. Then, she began hopping up and down, no longer looking like the fragile old woman who had entered the teepee. The songs did continue, and as they did, the old woman's behavior became more weird. She started making weird noises, hand movements, and shouting that the devil was outside, laughing, waiting to ruin the family of the patient. Fear swept through the teepee. As she was shouting, the people kept their heads down, praying even more. My uncle then said that the strangest thing happened. The old woman suddenly stood still. She perked up, like she had heard something that no one else could. A few seconds later, the sound of a coyote echoed in the distance. That's when she hopped to her feet, shouting something in a language that no one could understand. Her eyes became wide open, and with a strange gait, she dragged her body out of the teepee. My uncle said that she literally did that. She basically crawled backwards out of the teepee. He then said as soon as she stepped outside that there was a loud whoosh, like something with wings had flown away into the night. Everyone inside was frozen, shaken by what had just happened, and no one dared to even say anything, not until the ceremony was over. My uncle didn't tell me what happened for the rest of the ceremony. He said that he's not allowed to tell me. Well, after that, my uncle said that he learned the lesson the hard way. Never attend a ceremony for people that you don't know, and always be cautious. You never know who or what might show up at the ceremony. Ever since that day, he said he's never gone to a ceremony that he's not familiar with. Always listen to your elders and the rest. Wyatt was on duty that first week when the cinema closed due for the quarantine. You know, the one that we're all dealing with right now. For better or worse, he didn't want to go back for the second week. I guess being paid the minimum to sit around all day doing nothing is worse than sitting around all day serving customers. It makes sense. There's no distractions, so the clock does move slower every minute. Jamie and Patricia, they rotated on the second week. The managers took care of week 3, and I guess I was beneath them because I was assigned week 4. I guess I should be thankful. So many people are without work right now, and I was getting paid to sit on my ass all day. You might be wondering why the hell they were staffing a closed cinema in the first place. Well, welcome to 2020, where we pay 19-year-olds to babysit the concession stands of empty cinemas. On the off chance an Uber Eats order comes through, because apparently somebody couldn't go on another day without a $15 bag of popcorn and a $10 bar of candy. I'm not kidding. Load up the app. They're open for deliveries. It's crazy. I guess the bosses felt guilty because we were given the green light to do whatever we wanted while waiting for the orders to come through. And sometimes they came in very often. I had ignored the text from Wyatt. The text that he sent our group after his week on duty as nothing. A simple, don't go into theater 15, with no explanation as to why I didn't exactly ring any alarm bells. That theater had the gaming setup we ran out to party groups. I figured he had logged into his account and was trying to protect his data. Why don't you come to work and log out if it matters to you so much? So my first day back on the job was freaky. My manager stopped by to show me how to work the hot dog stand. She left about an hour in. I had been at the cinema after closing a few times, so it's not like I wasn't used to a mostly empty building. But it was different without my other co-workers. It was eerie, quiet. You could hear a pin drop, and it was also dark. Half of all the lights were off to conserve electricity. I wasn't sure how many orders to expect, so I spent the first evening just around the large lobby, using my employee pass to play arcade games for free, browsing the internet on my phone, and eating so much fucking popcorn. I was there from 3 to 10 p.m., 7 hours, and I only received one order. Small popcorn, extra butter. Wow, imagine having that much disposable income. I had to clean the machines an hour or so after use, bringing the grand total of work-related tasks accomplished that night to a high number of 2. I definitely earned my paycheck, huh? It really felt like babysitting once the kids have gone to bed and the parents left the junk food. The second night, I felt more comfortable wandering off. I kept the work tablet on me so that I would know when an order came in. I grabbed the newest releases that arrived right before the official shutdown, and I settled into Theater 1 to watch movies all night. We didn't get any orders that evening, so that was great. Someone did call asking if we were open, which, lady, did you not hear the pre-recorded message saying that we were closed at the start of the call? She was like, hi, are you open? And I was like, wham bam, no ma'am. Some people, I swear. The third night, the manager had put a list of things for me to do on the bulletin board. It was spring cleaning kind of shit. Organize the uniforms by size, take inventory, and deep clean the hallways. I cranked up the music on my phone and had myself a cleaning moment. Interrupted once or twice for stuff that people would order. Popcorn, and honestly, I can't wrap my head around this. Nachos and cheese. Who the fuck orders nachos and cheese for delivery? I'm honestly throwing up in my mouth just thinking about it. Moving on. I don't know if the boss expected me to complete this with a few shifts, but I finished them all in one night. Nothing new showed up on the bulletin board, so on the fourth night, I got my gaming on. The glorious Theater 15, with all the latest gaming consoles and a little library of games to play, and I had it all to myself. Have you ever thought about exploring the lands of Hyrule on the big screen? Because, let me tell you, it's the best. Everything was fine at first, but after maybe half an hour, I started getting this weird creepy crawling feeling over my shoulders, that I'm feeling watched feeling. You know, I knew I was alone, so it was completely irrational, but I couldn't shake it no matter how hard I tried. I had to get up and move to the last row, so that I would have the wall behind me. It helped a lot, but that feeling never left. And then, the blood moon started rising in the game, and I was like, yep, fuck this. I closed the game and went for a little power walk to shake off the oogie boogies. That flippin' blood moon music, man, why is it so eerie? I went back after a bit and put on everyone's favorite red and blue plumber, because there's nothing creepy about that. It was fine. Everything was fine. Nothing weird was happening. And suddenly, that feeling came back. I swept the room, and my stomach dropped when I saw someone sitting in the front row. I went through a roller coaster of instant panic. Like, holy shit, who is that? Oh, it must be the manager. Wait, no, the manager would call first. Tense. I pawed around for my flashlight, eyes locked on this person. I aimed it right at them. The seat was empty. I didn't see the movement of someone ducking down or anything. The seat was just empty. I panned the light around and it was still empty. Nothing. I had to walk down there and check row by row just to make sure. I convinced myself it was a shadow. Maybe a bug on the projector. But at that point, I was done with this for the night. I put the things away and headed back to the lobby, telling myself everything that I was doing in a sing-song voice, because that's how I cope with my nerves, alright? Just as I arrived, I nearly had a heart attack because the phone rang. I picked up and, hi, are you guys open? The rest of the shift was uneventful, though every now and again, paranoia would hit and I would find myself looking over my shoulder, thinking that one of my coworkers was playing a trick on me. I would then announce what I was doing and where I was going, and say, I know you're watching me, to try and keep them from jumping out at me. But, yeah, no. I was okay on the fifth night. I had given myself a good old pep talk. There was nothing weird about Theater 15. Why it got into my head. Everything is fine. There's nothing scary at all. Go play your video games. I got an early order of popcorn, so there was plenty left over for me to take into Theater 15. I chewed very loud and bravely announced to the room that I wasn't afraid and that I was going to have fun this evening. But despite my newfound courage and conviction, I still sat in the very back row. I started exploring Hyrule again. I survived another blood moon. I finished my popcorn. Everything was well. And then, near the last row of the first set of rows, I saw it again. I saw it with my own two eyes. It was on the seat. It was a person. I could see the outline of a male haircut. I could see a neck and shoulders. I could see some movement. Granted, not a lot. I stood up, knocking over my empty bag of popcorn, flashlight out, being right at the chair, and nothing. Not a damn thing. In the distance, I heard the phone ring, and I hurried out of the room without checking every row so I could answer the phone. Another person asking if we were fucking open. Bro, I massaged my temples and paced back and forth in the lobby. It was crazy. Being afraid of a theater room was crazy, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't go back. I left my trash there and I moved to the other side of the building, watching a movie in Theater 1 instead, where I felt nice and safe. There's nothing like the light of day and a good night's sleep. 3 p.m. on my 6th day at work. I showed up bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. I headed to Theater 15 to clean up yesterday's mess. I had the lights on too, to see better. Yeah, we'll go with that. I climbed up the stairs all the way to the back of the theater and scooped up my trash into a dustbin. As I turned around to go back down, I swear, I saw someone standing halfway up the middle rows. I did a double take and there was no one there. So I thought, alright buddy, you're losing it. I so badly wanted not to be afraid of that room. You have no idea. Badly enough that I actually went in with the last of the movies I hadn't watched yet. I kept the habit of me talking to myself. Wow, what a great movie I'm sitting here watching in a perfectly normal room. There's no ghost here. Nope, everything is fine and dandy. Idiot. I could hear my voice cracking. I had nothing to prove to anyone. Nothing. So why was I subjecting myself to this situation? If you guessed that things weren't fine and dandy, you're fucking right. At some point while watching the movie, I got that feeling again. My chest got tight, and I started to feel lightheaded. I could sense him there. I didn't even have to look. He was just a handful of rows down from me, and I could smell his rancid breath like something died in my granny's attic. Goosebumps formed on my arms. It wasn't just my imagination. I could see my breath hanging in the air. I shivered as I glued my eyes to the screen, trying not to look as fear paralyzed me. I saw the form from the corner of my eye. It shuffled from one seat to the next, lining himself up as though purposely trying to put himself in my direct line of sight. The lights were on. The movie was playing. I had my hand on my phone. I had every opportunity to run or call for help, but I couldn't. I held my breath as he suddenly seemed to phase into the next row, now only 2, maybe 3 rows away from me. It's hard to tell without looking directly. I try not to make a peep, as if I could go invisible if I was motionless and quiet. When I saw him phase into an even closer row, I fucking lost it. Finally able to move, I threw my popcorn at him and ran down the stairs screaming like a banshee. I don't even know if my popcorn hit anything. I didn't fucking look. I couldn't. I ran back to the lobby, the only place I felt safe, and I called my manager saying someone had broken in. She told me to wait outside and said she was on her way. She and another manager got there, and we swept the building room by room. But no one was there. No fucking shit. It was a damn ghost. Not that I was gonna tell them that. She actually had the nerve to ask me if I could still come in the next day. Can you believe that? I said no, and she offered to review the security cameras. For some reason, that actually made me feel a little bit better. We looked at the tapes and confirmed no one had come in or out of that room. We went through a whole week's worth of video just to be sure. By the way, there's no video of the room itself. The studios don't allow it, even if the cameras aren't aimed at the screens. She said she would get someone else to come after tomorrow, but she needed me one last night. She said she couldn't get anyone else on short notice. Blah blah blah. Alright, as long as I don't go into that room, I should be fine. On the last night, I was a nervous wreck. Every shadow made me flinch. Every stupid arcade game coming to life gave me a heart attack. Every first pop of the popcorn made me think I was gonna die. I didn't go into a single room, not number 15, not any of them. I was like a tiger in a cage, pacing around, watching and just waiting. I also didn't get a single order come in. I felt like I was wasting my time. The hours were so long. Then, around 8 o'clock, the phone rang. I wanted to scream at this fucking idiot who couldn't get this damn message that we're in a fucking pandemic and the cinema is fucking closed. AMC Cinema, how can I help you? I said through gritted teeth. I heard breathing, slow and shallow. It lasted for a few long, uncomfortable seconds before the voice of an old man spoke. "What's playing?" In Theater 15. I know it must have come from the phone. I had the receiver up against my ear after all. But I fucking swear, I heard the voice behind me. I left then and there. Fuck this shift. Fuck my replacement. I left the machine with popcorn still in it. I didn't even tell anyone I was going. I just left. Corporate did send an email out because of staffing issues. Our cinema is going to close from now on. This happened about 2 years ago. I remember it was late, around 11 p.m., when I decided to call up an old friend that I hadn't spoken to in a while. I dialed her number, but when someone picked up, it wasn't her. Instead, a lady with a strong southern accent answered. I asked for my friend, and she told me that she didn't know anyone by that name, and that she had just recently gotten this number. We started talking. Crazy, huh? Just small talk at first, and she was actually really friendly. I asked where she was from, and she told me she had moved from Tennessee to Rama, New Mexico, where she worked as a teacher. As we kept talking, I just started teasing her, asking her if she had seen any skinwalkers out there. You know, just joking around. But then, in a serious voice, she said, "Is that what they are?" That threw me off. I was like, "What do you mean by that?" She told me the story that gave me chills. She said she lived in a mobile home, one of those that sits a little high off the ground, and one night, she got up to use the bathroom. She didn't bother turning on the light because, why would you? Anyways, she's sitting there when she starts hearing this noise outside, right near the bathroom window. She looked over towards the sound, and there, in the window, was the shadow of a man. At first, she thought it was just someone snooping around, but as she stared at it, the shadow started changing. She said she watched as the face began to stretch, growing a long snout like a dog, and its ears got longer too. She told me this thing must have been at least 7 or 9 feet tall, easily towering over the window. She said that the worst part was that she felt frozen in place, like she couldn't move. She said it was almost like she was under some kind of spell that was controlling her. Finally, after what felt like forever, the shadow disappeared, and as soon as it was gone, she could move again. She ended up running straight to the bedroom, freaking out and hiding underneath the covers, telling herself that it was just a nightmare. After that night, she kept hearing things outside. She was able to get one of her teacher friends to come spend a few days with her, just so that she could feel more safe. Of course, her friend didn't believe her, saying that it was most likely just a bad dream, but she knew what she saw. After that, she kept hearing things outside the night, but she wasn't telling her friend anything until one night she experienced something weird too, and that's when she finally believed her. Before we got off the phone, she asked me how to get rid of it. I told her to go up to the mountain, find some clean cedar, dry it out, and burn it, or better yet, ignore that, and find a native friend who could ask a medicine man to bless her, and her friend as well. She told me that she had never seen anything like that before in her life. And right before we hung up on the phone, she said something like, "We're gonna finish our teaching contracts and get out of here, and move back to the city." I'm not sure if they ever did leave. I forgot about the whole thing for a while, but for some reason, it's been on my mind again. "4 years ago, I was married to a man who was more of a monster than a loving husband. One night, he had been drinking and started an argument with me. I tried calling my mom, but he tore the phone out of the wall. Crying, I packed up a small bag and decided to walk the 1/4 of a mile to his parents' house, with every intention to make that phone call. It was pitch black, and there wasn't a moon, so it was extremely dark. We lived in a small village on the rest between Upper and Lower Red Lake. There is very little traffic normally, but at night it becomes completely empty. I stumbled down the driveway and made it to the pavement. It was very quiet, and I quickly felt like someone was watching me. I continued on my way, walking as quickly as I could for some odd reason. As soon as my feet started to move, the underbrush in the ditch came alive. I heard twigs snapping and leaves crunching. I stopped and so did the noise. I looked around but could only see darkness and shadows. I slowly started walking again, and so did the noises, the faster I walked. Whatever it was though, scared the shit out of me, but not bad enough to turn around. I was almost to my in-laws and could see their yard light. The noises in the ditch was right along beside me, and now I could make out the lower brush moving towards me. I froze in fear. Right then, I heard my old man's car and saw the headlights coming my way. That's when I noticed that the weeds in the ditch stopped moving as my husband's car pulled up behind me. I stood there staring into the darkness. That was most likely the only time I was ever happy to see him. I never told anyone this story, but I do know that on that side of the road, drivers have said that they see little people crossing the road, right between our house and his parents' house. Maybe it was a group of little people. Maybe they heard me and my husband arguing and decided to be nosy. Or maybe they were wondering who's dumb enough to walk around in pitch black. Some people from different tribes have told me that the little people there are actually good. But if that was the case here, then he should have jumped in the car and beat his ass to see if he liked it. I've seen so much in my life that I'm beginning to believe that there are things out there that we don't know about, and darkness is the perfect cover. My husband did tell me around the time when I was still there that he found a tiny skull outside of our house a while back, and people in the rest have said that they seen him crossing the road back by the shore, and if you hike a little bit, you will find tiny steps going up the hill where they do their ceremonies. A long time ago, I was living in the boonies alone. I decided to chop some wood for the night. Every time that I swung the axe, I heard a whistle, so I would stop and look around. This went on for maybe about one load of a wheelbarrow before I chose to quit. I was getting this creepy feeling. I built my fire and stood at the window looking out into the woods wondering who was lurking around. So as I'm standing, I hear the whistle again. Except this time, it's very close. I steady my breathing. I stay quiet for a few seconds. It turns out, my nose was whistling at me. When I was 20, I was out of a job and didn't have any university or plans on going to one. I was basically lost in limbo without knowing where to turn next. I was living at home and spent hours on the internet staying up all night and sleeping all day. Do you know what that's like? Well, I always been a bit of an introvert that preferred the company of me, myself, and I. Staying up through the night and ignoring the day was a way out of the norm, and avoiding people altogether at that. Then I got the classic talk from my dad, the one that all kids get when they're being useless sitting at home and doing nothing. I was tired of hearing it, so I decided to move out and continue my antisocial behavior. And I have a family way up north in the sticks. There's nothing around except a couple of sawmills and a couple of nickel mines. My grandfather has a piece of property that is over 350 acres of unexplored land. Just a big section of the woods, streams, ponds, and rocks. My grandfather has a timeshare in Florida, so he was gone for the rest of the year. I called him and asked if I could go up there to live. In exchange, I would do some lumberjacking for wood to sell and use. I remember his comments exactly. Yeah, I don't really give a fuck. You're wasting your time up there. No work, no school, no people, no internet. But if that's what you want, go ahead and knock yourself out. Just don't burn down my fucking house. By this point, my bags were already packed. I knew he wouldn't mind. I told Dad what I was doing, and he was pretty much speechless, and he also had a look of concern. He then told me I was wasting my life when I should just go to school. I told him that this is what I wanted, and that I needed to do it at this point in time. So I got into my '93 Civic hatchback that had a short suspension and bald tires, and took the 14-hour car ride into no man's land. I made myself good and comfy when I eventually got to the house. It was given to my grandfather by an Irishman that had passed on. He built the house when he was very young, with his young family around the 1800s, and it had just been there ever since, and then he passed it to my grandfather. If you ever seen the Amityville Horror, it looks just like that house, but a little bit smaller. And it also had an old stove in it that was this old black cast iron beast. And if you can remember using those, you might be as old as I am. It was the kind that you wouldn't really see in a house anymore. It was something like you would see in the movies or like an old historic village tour. There was a large barn full of tools and an old John Deere tractor. There was a smokehouse for meats. There was a large veggie garden. And there was an outhouse and a chicken coop that wasn't really in use anymore. After unpacking and relaxing, the distance and the fact that I was alone began to set in. There wasn't TV, internet, or a video game in sight. My grandfather had 2 snowmobiles, a 4-wheeler, a gator, and a dirt bike, and lots of hunting rifles and shotguns. I figured most of my time would be spent outdoors anyway, which was fine, but I was a little bit nervous. The next day, I drove into town, if you could really even call it that. I stocked up on canned goods and cupboard foods that could survive a nuclear holocaust. I came back and got to lumberjacking. It was slow at first to remember the stuff that my grandpa had shown me as a kid, when I was around 8 to 12 years old. But after about 4 or 5 hours, I kinda was starting to get it again. I would take the tractor, chains and hooks and a jerry can and chainsaw into the bush. I would find a cedar or a spruce tree and cut it down. I would then chain it up to the tractor and drag it off into the main trail, where I had a normal flatbed trailer waiting. I would then cut it up into 2 or 3 foot sections and stack it. Once the trailer was full, I would tow it to the barn, and at the back of this barn, there was a big hydraulic wood splitter. I would split it into 4 to 6 sections, depending on the diameter of the piece. Once I had cut it all, I stacked it all. This was the routine. It was long and hard work, but it gave me purpose and it gave me joy. I thought of myself as something like a pioneer. I was in the great outdoors, alone, taking down trees and supplying villagers with something that they needed to survive. I felt proud of myself, and I also made some cash doing it. I wasn't getting rich, but I had enough for all the things that were needed to survive in such a place like this. I kept this routine for months and months, and the locals began to come to me for wood because it was cheap, and I was a youngster, as they say, looking after my grandfather's home, who was well thought of in town. Then, the winter came, and everything went to shit. Winter on the farm was one of the most depressing times of my life. Not being able to do much work and having no interest in human contacts or internet really brought me down. I reflected on my life and the fact that I had no friends anymore, because I just abandoned them with no warning. Why did I do this? But I had some type of mental feeling that I had to leave everyone behind and never speak to them again. I even began having some suicidal thoughts. The more I thought about it, the more I accepted it as being okay. I wasn't that religious, so I didn't have the thought of going to hell or anything. I viewed it more as if a goldfish were to die. Where do you think it would go? It doesn't really go anywhere. I think it's just that blackness. No more thoughts. Like turning off a car for the last time. I thought about how my family would miss me and how it would hurt them. But I was so depressed, unhappy about the progress in my life, and the fact that I had no one. After a few weeks of minus 30-degree weather and brutal snow, I decided to get on the snowmobile, load up my snowshoes, take my rifle, and go deep into the woods to end my mental suffering. I had given up on everything. I jumped on the sled at 8 in the morning. The sun was brighter than ever. You couldn't even look anywhere without squinting your eyes. The sun reflected off the snowy landscape as if it were like a mirror. With a full tank and a jerry can as a backup, I could go a long way. I let the thing idle and get warmed up. I was thinking to myself that I may actually go through with this. I kept going over the what ifs and buts in my head, as if I was trying to talk myself out of it. But I said fuck it out loud, and jumped on it and let it rip. I took the tractor trail as far as it would go into the bush. It ends after a solid 45-minute drive, and then it turns into a four-wheeler and gator trails. I took the trail deeper and deeper into the woods. After a solid 2.5 hours of riding, the trail stopped and did a U-turn. It was the end of the track. I then grabbed my rifle, put on my snowshoes, and quickly realized something. I hadn't wrote a note for anyone to find my body, or even know what I had done. I knew that if my parents had no idea what happened to me, they would wonder for the rest of their life, and it would tear them apart. I yelled out and cursed, and I threw my rifle. I faced towards my sled and did it again. I started to turn and remembered that I literally just threw my rifle. I cursed again, got off my sled, and walked towards my rifle that was on the ground. I bent down to grab it, and I stood up. A burst of adrenaline was injected throughout my entire body, and it turned my cold frame into a steel oven. There was a black figure in the distance, hiding behind a tree and watching me. It wasn't an animal. It looked like the shape of a man, but it wasn't a man. I ran to my sled and hit the throttle. I rode back home and didn't look back. To get back home, it only took maybe 2.5 hours or something. I rode fast. I got inside the house, put on coffee, and ate some beans and toast. As I pigged out, I kept having this image in my head, and I was wondering what this was. How did it get there? For how long has it been there? Does it know that I'm still here? How could it survive out here? Is it coming for me? Can it follow my tracks? And does my grandpa know about it? I then decided to call my grandfather in Florida. Unfortunately, he didn't answer his phone. He was most likely relaxing on the beach somewhere, drinking beers. I then cursed myself again. I called my dad just to calm my nerves. He could then sense something was off about me and ask what was up. I told him I was out hunting and I had seen something. I described what I had seen, and he went silent. He took a breath and said, "Son, when I was a kid living on the farm, me and a girl went back to the lake for a swim. We got there on our bikes in August. I had my rifle with me because of all the bears that would pass through their land back then. After me and the girl were swimming around and laughing and doing our thing, she screamed and pointed across. I looked across the pond, and there it stood. It looked like a burned up human being. He was all charred and stuff, and he also had a little bit of hair on the top of his head. His eyes were as bright blue as I had ever seen. Its arms were so long, and its hands nearly came to its knees. It then screamed at us, and the birds flew to the trees. I ran out of the pond, grabbed my rifle, and shot at it. It ran to the trees, and me and the girl jumped on our bikes and got out of there. This was the first and final time I had ever seen that thing or anything like it. I actually hadn't even thought about it in years until you told me that. You need to be careful. In fact, why don't you just come home, son? It's boring up there anyways." I told him I was staying and enjoyed it here, but that was definitely a lie. I got off the phone with him feeling no better. The only difference was that I could think a little bit more clear. I thought if this thing is coming for me, it's gonna take a while by foot, so I figured I got time. I got the guns and put a loaded one in every room. Some had slugs, some had shells. I also had a hatchet that I sharpened to a very fine thickness with a stone grinder in the barn. If it was to swing at your wrist with one motion, it would most likely cut it off. Eventually, I made one final meal, turned on all the lights, and left all the blinds open for good visibility, and to make it harder for whatever it is out there to see me inside. I then went upstairs, which had 2 bedrooms and large windows, one with a walkout balcony. I thought this would be an excellent spot to watch and snipe. As I settled in to see if this thing would come, I began thinking about what I was going to do earlier. I was still depressed, but because I was active and keeping my mind on something, I didn't want to kill myself anymore. Maybe that was it, I thought. Keeping active, busy, and productive. And maybe with a bit of excitement thrown in, it helps to keep your mind off doing something. Yet that doesn't really matter anyways. Just as I was having a bit of a personal milestone, I heard heavy footsteps in the snow. I looked out the window, and before my eyes was that thing that I had seen earlier. But now, it was a complete view. I got a strong feeling of nervousness. It was exactly how my dad described it to me. The moonlight reflected off of them like the cover of the dark side of the moon. If I had to guess, it was about 6'3" or so. It had like a longer face and a large overbite. It looked human, but like, not human, if that makes sense. I ran out on the porch to get a shot off. It darted around the house before I could even lift my weapon. And I thought, oh fuck, that thing's fast. I ran inside again, ran to the other window, and I could see it again, just standing there like an idiot, watching me. I turned the crank, and the window opened up. And that's when I said, "Who are you?" There was no reply. It just stared at me. And I repeated, "Tell me who you are, or I'm gonna blow your head off." And then, it spoke. It said its name in a slow, drawn out, harsh voice. It said something like, "Sure, that, my name." I then said, "What do you want with me? I'm minding my own business out here. Leave me alone." And then it walked closer to the house and it looked up at me. My nose was filled with a very pungent smell. It then said, "If you won't, I will." In that exact same drawn out voice that can almost not be described unless I was mimicking it with some type of computer sound program. I then said, "Do what?" It said, "Kill yourself. You failed." My heart froze. It then stretched its arms out from the wall of the house and then tried climbing up the wall like it was freaking Spider-Man or something. I yelled and panicked from the sheer shock and fumbled my rifle. It fell right out of the window, and by this time, it was feet away from the window. It reached its weird god-awful hand into the window, and it cut my arm with its fingernail. I grabbed my hatchet and buried it into its forearm. It then made the sound a bear makes when you shoot at it. It fell to the ground on its side, and I ran for the spare gun in the room. I came back to the window and it was running for the barn. I took a shot and hit it, but it didn't do much. This gun had a shell and it isn't really ideal for the range that I fire at. I pushed my dresser into the hall and pushed it downstairs. I then pushed the few end tables into the staircase. I essentially clogged it up so it couldn't get up there from the main floor. I know it can climb now, but I prefer to have cover from one side than multiple sides. I locked the door and just kept my eyes and ears open. I didn't see it again. Daybreak came quick. I could see its blood droplets in the snow. I climbed over and pulled stuff out of the stairwell and investigated. It was nowhere to be found. I grabbed my rifle and followed the droplets. It went down the tractor trail. I walked for about 10 minutes following this trail. I could see it go off even further in its foot tracks as well. I decided it wasn't worth it to go ahead and try to hunt it. That's when I decided it was time to leave this place for good. I went inside, grabbed my clothes, got into my car, and drove off. I never told my dad or my grandpa. I still have nightmares about this thing, and I wonder how it knew what I was thinking to do. I've been trying to research other sightings and descriptions of it, but I can't find anything. I don't want to say it's demonic because I really don't know, and I'm not really religious like I said. I still don't know what it is. No idea. All I know is that in the last 8 years since it happened, I've been having a bunch of health problems and bad luck. I have night terrors of this thing in almost 95% of my sleep. I do gotta take medication just to stay asleep. I think it may have been the nail that caught me when it reached into the window. I often do wonder if it's still up there. and I would like to go back up there and try to go hunting for it if I got a death wish. But my grandpa passed away 4 years ago. The property was sold to clear cutters by my dad and his sisters. As far as I know, the house was knocked down, and they put up a small office and living quarters for the lumberjacks who clear cut there. If you're wondering where this is, it's near Chapleau, Ontario, in Canada. Something awful happened to me when I was 16. I was living in an isolated area, in the middle of nowhere. To go to my grandparents' house, I had to go all the way down a forest area with a cliff, some really narrow trails, and various dirt paths on the side, and then follow a river till you get to the large chunk of land that he owns. It's basically a death trap. But back then, when me and my friends were young, we were reckless, thinking we were invincible. So of course we did really stupid things like run through these narrow dirt paths. It took about 30 minutes, sometimes 20 if we were running, to go from the small town where my dad and I lived at the time to get there. And again, this is depending on how fast you go. My gramps, being super stubborn and old, refused to leave his land and move into town with dad and me. Now I had two close friends back then. Tom, who was 18 and always instigated whatever stupid thing got us into trouble that week, and Sean, who was the same age as me and was pretty much the butt of all the pranks. He became a bit of a grump and had a huge angry outburst every now and then. Looking back on the whole situation, I don't think that we were all actually good friends, but there was no one else to hang out with, so we just made it happen. The story happened on a rainy afternoon when Tom and I were watching TV at my place. My dad had been working like always. He worked at a farm and was always processing meat, and he got home with a big piece of ham for my grandpa. I was told to take it to him, but Dad said that I should wait until tomorrow because the rain makes the path dangerous, regardless of how mad Grandpa would be about not getting his ham that night. And I thought, it's less work for me tonight, so I went along with it. That day, Tom was just joking and picking on Sean to the point where I actually had to sit in between them to avoid a full-on fist fight. After a little longer, my dad got shit-faced. This was nothing new to us, even though it never happened with my friends here, and it never happened during the week like this. So he most likely had a hard day at work. Us being loud teens eventually, as you can imagine, made him a little less than happy. He came in screaming. This made everything very awkward, and it was a pretty bad outburst. After a few minutes of silence with only the TV breaking it up, I got up and grabbed a ham from the fridge. I asked the guys to come outside with me, because I really didn't want to sit with this in the house. I explained to them that I would take the ham to my grandpa and spend the night there. By this point, the sun was starting to set, but Tom insisted that we all go. Sean didn't want to. He didn't want to walk the entire way back in the dark, especially since he was a little unfamiliar with the trails. But of course, we were teenagers, so we called him all sorts of names like, well, you can imagine. And so we eventually convinced him to go, or more like we ended up peer pressuring him to come. So off we went into the forest. Tom ran into his house to get a flashlight beforehand. It wasn't dark enough to need it yet, but we were gonna need it. I was carrying the stupid ham, which meant that my hands were full, but Tom and Sean were just jumping around the overgrown roots until we reached the cliff area. Then, everything went downhill very bad. Needless to say, Tom was just messing with Sean the whole way. It was starting to get on my nerves too, and it was starting to get dark as well. I was feeling pretty shitty at this point. The mud was getting annoying. Everything was. Then, Tom did it. He called Sean over to the edge. He said, what's down there? Sean was having none of it and said he was gonna go back. I would have called BS too, but Tom actually seemed concerned. He also called me over as well, and he said, guys, I'm serious. You gotta come see this. Sean, mumbling under his breath, went, and when he was right next to Tom, Tom acted like he was gonna push him off the cliff. and then pulled him back by his shirt. At this point, Tom is laughing his ass off. Sean, on the other hand, fell on his ass. He went crazy. He started throwing punches and kicks at Tom, who was not paying attention and still actually looking at something over the cliff. The laughing stopped when Sean hit Tom in the face. I couldn't do anything but tell him to stop because I was carrying the stupid ham. The fight didn't last. It was so quick. My heart stopped beating for a second. Tom moved out the way. Sean slipped off the edge of the cliff and down into the forest. The whole scene sent chills down my spine. It still does. I dropped the ham and was about to run to town to get some help, but Tom stopped me. He was rambling about how there was no time and that we had to go get him, or that he could die. But I knew damn well that he was more scared of the police finding out that his prank led to Sean going over the side of the cliff. Regardless, we both ran down the path as fast as we could, almost falling over more than once. We were screaming for Sean the whole way, but after the initial scream, there was nothing but silence. Once we got down there, we ended up in a very thick part of the forest. This was in the opposite direction from the way to my grandpa's place. And the thing is, despite living there in the area my whole life, I had never been down in that thick area of the forest. My grandpa was always very serious about never going there. My dad as well. They said it was very dangerous, that there were so many wild animals, and quote, other things that you should be worried about. And by this point, it was dark. The sun had completely set. Everything was damp. Our only means of navigation was the flashlight that Tom had. But that's when I noticed something else was off. The forest itself, in this area, was very quiet. Nothing compared to the path that I always took, which always had birds even in the rain. But here on this side, there was nothing. Like idiots, we ran deeper and deeper, screaming for Sean as hard as our lungs would let us. Suddenly, we heard it. A very scratchy voice. I remember Tom taking a breath because he thought Sean was alive, thinking that maybe he just got really screwed up by the fall. Maybe he broke bones or something and got the wind knocked out of him. I said we ran towards the voice, but Tom was the one running. I got stuck by the branches the whole way through. It's impressive how far adrenaline can take you, but we were completely confused. We didn't even know where we were going. We only heard the voice the one time, and we had already lost the way. We ended up getting to a swampy area in the forest, and that's where we saw it. The mud was up to our ankles and got deeper and deeper as you went. Branches reaching off everywhere. And like I said, that's when I noticed it. I swore I could see something in the trees. Some of those things that I thought were weird branches looked like arms. Tom was still calling for Sean, but he eventually went silent as he was looking down. Then he turned and ran off in the other way. I tried to ask what was going on. I tried to follow him, but then something pulled me back by my jeans. I swore I could feel my jeans rip. Something had a grip on me. I fell face first into the mud. I tried to do my best to get up quickly, find my feet, and then, just barely noticeable at a distance, I saw 2 eyes. And what honest to God, looked like a mouth giving me a smile, right there in the darkness. I couldn't make out anything else. Nothing, not even a head, just eyes and a mouth. I got up and tried to run in the same direction from where we came, but then I got tripped up backwards by branches that seemed to appear out of nowhere. I thought I was gonna have a heart attack. I started breathing really heavy, panicking. That's when I saw another face, but I thought it couldn't be the same one. From here on, my memories are a little bit blurry. I remember getting up. I remember running. I remember being chased. I remember the only noise I could hear was my own footsteps, my heartbeat, and myself crying. Eventually, I must have reached the river because my grandpa told me that I got to his home late at night. He checked on me and said that I didn't have any severe damage outside of bruises, cuts, and scratches. He told me he locked down the house and didn't sleep a wink, watching over me with his hunting rifle. The next day, I told him everything. He didn't know what it was, but he did go to town and report it all. Sean was found. He was stuck on the top of a tree in between branches. He had snapped a bunch of bones, but he was alive. Tom was found miles away in a clearing, unconscious, barely alive, full of cuts and bruises, dehydrated, and apparently, when he came to, he just rambled for days about eyes in the darkness, branches coming up from the swamp, and tripping him like hands grabbing at him. Needless to say, this put an end to Tom and Sean's friendship, and to be honest, I moved away shortly after this. I'm kinda glad that I'm now far away from that place. This story takes place on my res, the Walker River Paiute Res in western Nevada, at a tribal elder's house. Those from my res will know who I'm talking about. This tribal elder was the oldest member of the tribe when he passed 2 years ago, well into his 90s. When he passed on, his house and property were being disputed between nieces and nephews and his common-law wife, who was from another res. Her grandson, fresh out of prison, ended up staying there. He was a big party person, and he brought his tweaker white girlfriend down to stay in the house with him. None of them had any income, so they started selling off the elder's belongings. They didn't realize that some of what they were getting rid of wasn't just old stuff. It was sacred. The elder had medicine bundles for protection and healing that was never supposed to be disturbed, but they didn't care. They sold it off like it was nothing. Now, who would buy stuff like this? You'll learn living on the rest that there are things you shouldn't do, items that shouldn't be touched or messed with. However, there are evil people with evil intentions that want items that belong to the dead so that they can do their witchcraft ways. Or maybe some people just buy these items out of ignorance. Anyways, soon after, the grandson kicked his girlfriend out and he moved in a girl from the local res. Another tweaker, just 18, they kept selling off the elder's things, and eventually, the guy got thrown in jail. Our tribal council voted to kick him off the res, and he left the house keys with the girl. Now, one of my close friends went out there with her one night to hang out and get high, but when he came back, he was shaken. He told me some messed up stuff went down at the house, and my friend knew better than to go hang around inside his house because of who it belonged to. The whole situation about the grandson being thrown in jail and kicked out was known around the res. Everybody knew to stay away from this place. There were quite a few rumors and stories. So he told me they were sitting in the living room, watching TV. He said they started hearing footsteps on the roof. At first, they thought it might be an animal, but the steps were too heavy, like someone pacing back and forth above them. Then, out of nowhere, they heard a low voice coming from one of the windows. It wasn't speaking the American language. It sounded different, but guttural, like someone was chanting some spell or something wrong. Then, my friend said they looked out the window to see what the noise was, and that's when they saw them. The figures. 4 of them. At first he thought they were just people walking around, but he realized something wasn't right. These figures weren't fully human. They were gray, like shadows, but their shapes were all twisted and wrong, shifting around. They moved in a slow, unnatural way, circling the ground outside. He said they were tall, too tall, and hunched over like something was crawling beneath their skin. Their limbs looked weird, bending at odd angles, and their heads would twitch unnaturally, like they were struggling to keep a human form. As they moved closer to the house, he saw their eyes, black pits that seemed to draw in all the light around them. Terrified, they pulled the curtains back, trying to ignore the sounds, but when they peeked out again, one of the figures was right there, standing at the window, staring in. Its face was twisted, the skin was stretched tight over sharp bones, and the mouth was pulled into a grin, but it was the eyes, the empty eyes, black, soulless, as he described them, that made him freeze. He swore the thing was looking straight into his soul, like it was putting some curse on him. They didn't know what to do. Running outside seemed like a death sentence, but staying inside felt no better. So they went into the kitchen, going down onto the floor, trying to stay out of sight of the windows. He whispered that they need to stay silent. He said that every creak of the house, every bit of wind outside sent their hearts racing. Then, the scratching sounds began. It got worse. It sounded like someone, or something, was digging, not just outside, but right underneath them. My friend grabbed the kitchen knife, as if that would do anything. But what else could he do? The noise continued, growing louder, almost like whatever was down there was trying to tunnel its way in. They stayed like that for hours, curled up on the kitchen floor, trying to figure out what to do. Every now and then they would hear footsteps again, on the roof, around the sides, or pacing back and forth just beyond the windows. He said it felt like they were being surrounded. As dawn was starting to creep up, the noises stopped. No more digging, no more footsteps, just an eerie silence. That's when the girl finally told him everything, the truth about the house, and what happened ever since the elder passed. She explained how they started selling items that were in a medicine bundle, items that should have never been moved, let alone be sold. But they had, and in doing so, they had invited something into the home. Hearing that made my friend sick to his stomach. He realized that whatever had been watching them, whatever had been trying to get inside, wasn't just some sort of spirit. He knew they couldn't stay any longer. Fuck this, he said under his breath, and with his heart pounding, he finally decided that they would run to the door. As they scrambled outside, expecting one of these things to come rushing at them. However, the yard was empty, or at least, it looked like it. He said that when they got to his truck, his stomach dropped. The door was open, like someone was inside. All his stuff was everywhere. On the front was a stick, tied up and twisted, and wrapped in something. My friend knew what it was. A witching stick. Something used in dark ceremonies. That's when it hit him. These things weren't just spirits. They were skinwalkers, and they must have been doing some sort of ceremony or curse on the house. He then told me that panic surged through him as he grabbed the stick and threw it as far as he could into the brush. He didn't care where it landed. He just knew he couldn't let it stay with him. They jumped into the truck and peeled out of there, dirt kicking up behind them as they sped away from the house, away from whatever had been lurking there, hoping that it wouldn't follow them back into town. Over the next few days, my friend felt like something was after him. He would see someone, moving just out of the corner of his eye, always watching. At night, he would wake up to the sound of scratching at his window, and when he would look outside, he said he would see those same figures standing just beyond the tree line, waiting. He knew he couldn't keep living like that, in fear, as everybody knows that these things, these skinwalkers, thrive off of fear. So he went to go see a medicine man. The medicine man listened to everything, his face getting more serious as he told him everything. When my friend finished, the elder just sat in silence and then spoke to him. He said this was happening because of what had been done in the elder's house. Sacred things had been disturbed, sold off, and in doing so, they had invited something evil. Not specifically him, but the people who lived there. You should never touch a medicine bundle. Also, the moment you laid hands on that stick, it was like you accepted what it was meant for. He explained that these items, done in dark ceremonies, carry a power that's not easily understood. They aren't just items. They're beyond your understanding. Tossing it aside didn't do anything. By touching it, you accepted the curse, you can say. The curse it carried. The medicine man's words scared my friend, as he was finally starting to understand the gravity of what happened. The elder went on to explain that this was not something to take lightly, especially in the home of a medicine man who had passed on. When a medicine man walks off into the spirit side, you must leave their things alone. The medicine man warned, you don't go inside their home, and you never touch what belonged to them. Those items are tied to their spirit, to the work that they done, and disturbing these items is like opening a door that you can't close. The medicine man made it clear that some of these items are sacred, part of the owner. Once that person has passed on, those items are not just left behind for nothing. To disturb them is to disturb the dead. It's like pulling them back, and in doing so, you allow other things to enter the place. My friend sat frozen, realizing that by simply being in the house, by even being a witness about what happened there, he had become part of this whole thing. The medicine man performed the cleansing ceremony, using herbs and chants to sing. Smoke from burning sage and sweetgrass filled the air. My friend said that he could feel the heaviness lifting, but the elder warned him that some things, once disturbed, leave scars that never fully healed, and that there would be people out there, evil people, using this as an opportunity for their witchcraft ways. After the ceremony, my friend said that he stopped seeing things and feeling like something was after him. He didn't see the figures anymore, but the medicine man told him to stay far away from that house. It was a place that had been tainted, and anyone who set foot in there risked being drawn into something they couldn't escape. As for the girl, she was never seen again. She stopped coming around, and no one seemed to know what happened to her. Maybe she left the reservation, or maybe the Skinwalkers had gotten to her first. All I know is that after that night, my friend never set foot near that house again. One last thing that my friend told me: never enter the home of someone who has passed on, and what belongs to them must stay with them. So my parents were big outdoor buffs. My father was an ex-champion boat racer, and my mom was an Alabama race country girl. So they always wanted to go camping, fishing, and do all that stuff. When I was little, they went on a trip with some of their friends when I was about 10, which would be about 16 years ago. Since then, they refused to go camping anymore. Ever. My dad told me the story sometime after I turned 18. It still makes me wonder considering the following. My parents moved a lot, and they only had one set of friends that they really kept in touch with at all times: Danny and Lisa. Danny and Lisa were not really outdoor nuts like my parents, but they were friends, and it's fun to go camping with your friends, right? So they all planned a 5-day trip to the lake, which was south of where we lived, with a creek that was on Danny's father's property, so they could camp out on that property and fish all they wanted to. They could then go to the lakes and everything else. I'm gonna tell the rest of the story from my dad's point of view. Well, from his account. The first 2 days were quite normal, just camping, drinking, sharing stories while fishing, going on a boat, and water skiing. It was pretty much heaven. It was just young adult parents having fun. On the second night, everyone kept hearing these weird noises and barks like two dogs were in a fight, but they were both hurt and just yelping the whole time. They figured it was coyotes and they slept. The next day, they continued on their adventures, but at night, they kept hearing these noises, but they were extremely close to the camp, so my father and Danny went up to see if they could scare them off, while my mom and Lisa stayed behind. They were scared, hiding inside a tent, most likely reading the Bible. Anyways, my dad and Danny went out to look for these fighting coyotes, searching by following the sound. My dad had a shotgun, and Danny had a machete. They were hoping to scare these coyotes or whatever it was with a gunshot. They then got to a clearing, and they could hear the noise extremely loud, but it seemed to be coming from everywhere, as if the sounds were kind of distant from each other. Now, my dad isn't really scared of anything, and he swears he saw Bigfoot when he was 14, but this was different. Randomly, he just started telling Danny to go back. No questions, no explanation, just, Danny, we need to go back. So they did, but the sounds didn't fade away this time. Danny nervously asked my dad what was going on, but my dad wouldn't tell him. He just kept shushing him. Danny's a bit of a goofball, which is why I got along with Uncle Danny. So he thought my dad was getting him back for a prank. He kept nudging my dad, trying to get him to say, "You fell for it." But my dad never said anything. Finally, they got close to the creek, a ways up from the camp, and that's when my dad told Danny to run, fast, like, run away right now. And that's when my dad took off. Danny apparently followed but tripped and called for my dad. But my dad, who tears up and chokes up at this part, which is also uncharacteristic of him, refused to go back for him, even though Danny started calling for help. Danny was yelling that his leg was broken. It hurt, but my dad just kept running. Then, my dad, my mom, and Lisa all said that they heard what sounded like a really, really loud mountain lion growl, almost like two lions going at it, amplified by 70 times. That's how loud it was. It made my dad's ears ring. After this noise, Danny stopped screaming for help. My dad got back to camp, and the ladies asked what the hell was going on, but my dad just said something was out there. My mom, being the practical woman that she is, said, "What was it?" But my dad wouldn't answer. Lisa was freaking out, asking where Danny was. My dad just kept saying, "He'll be here in a few minutes." But it wasn't a few minutes. A few hours passed, and the ladies were extremely worried about Danny. My dad apparently would cringe whenever they said something. Eventually, from the opposite side that my dad had arrived from, came Danny, walking up just fine to the camp, not saying anything. Something my mom says that she won't forget because this is what tipped her off that something was very wrong. Danny first walked up and nudged his way next to my mom, but after the weird look and death stare from my father, he moved closer to Lisa, who had been nagging at him for about 10 minutes. He would either just say yes or no and just stare into the fire. My dad finally asked Danny what happened to his leg. Danny looked up, confused. My dad told him, "I thought you said it was broken." Danny then looked at him and replied, "Broken?" And then, as if on cue, he just started yelling, my leg, I think it's broken." The ladies then grabbed the med kits and first aid and water, saying that it was him going into shock. But upon getting his jeans off, he actually refused to help them and made it hard for them to remove them. There was no obvious break. There was no blood, just bruises up and down his side. Lisa kept asking what happened, but he would just grunt and wave her hands away from him. My dad then said, "He's fine, just let him sleep." They then went into their tents. They said that they heard Lisa nagging on one side, arguing with Danny because he would never reply when she would ask him questions. So she finally said she was just gonna go to the bathroom and pee. Danny asked if he could come with her since there were animals out there. In not so many words, she said okay, and they left. My dad woke up around 10 in the morning and started making breakfast. Danny and Lisa were gone. My mom asked where they were, but my dad wouldn't reply. After a little while, they both came back, without saying anything. They weren't even holding hands, in each other's arms, or even with their arms over the shoulder, or anything like they always were. They were just standing next to each other. They refused food, and Danny would randomly yell out, my leg, as Lisa kept complaining of feeling sick. My mom suggested that they should go home and call off the whole trip on account of Danny's leg, which now was not limping at all, to my mom's horrified recollection. The two nodded, and my father just kind of looked at them. They all agreed, so Danny and Lisa got into my parents' car, not theirs, and they just waited. They didn't even pack up their tents, food, coolers, bag, or anything. My mom then came over and asked if they were gonna grab their things, and they shook their heads. My dad then asked, "Why don't you take your own car?" And they both said at the same time, "Broken," almost like in a creepy, practiced way. My dad sighed, packed up the car, and they drove off. Danny and Lisa stayed quiet the whole way back, except for the random mumblings with each other. My parents then took them home and came and got me. and we could tell something was wrong. Besides them coming home days early, they said that Danny got hurt, and that's why they came home. A few days later, I asked if we could go see them, but my dad replied, no, a little too quickly. So I thought he was just mad at me, so I left to go play in my room. A few weeks later, I asked about Uncle Danny again, and my dad said that we weren't gonna go see them no more. I wasn't mad, but I was curious, so I asked why, and he told me something about his dad being sick, and I was pretty sad about it, so I eventually just forgot about it, and life moved on. So about 5 years later, I'm at a supermarket where I used to live when all of this happened. It was also right by where Danny and Lisa lived, only on the other side of the road. When I was 10, I was never allowed to go over, but now that I was driving, I decided to go see the old house and check out Danny and Lisa's house. I'm driving down slowly, almost creeping down the street, when I spot Danny walking down. So I'm really excited and I flag him down. I pull over and I start talking to him. He seemed a little stiff to me, kind of robotic, I guess you could say, especially when he gave me a hug, but it was way too tight. I asked Danny how he's been, and he said he's been okay. I asked him where Lisa was, and he said at home. So I asked him if I could go say hi to her, and he agreed. I walked with him, and I asked him about all kinds of people and tried to catch up with him, but he didn't seem to remember or care about 90% of it, which seemed kind of strange because Danny was always my awesome, involved in everything Uncle Danny. So I asked him a couple obvious trick questions, and he failed them. Now I'm a little bit nervous, but I just brush it off as I was excited to see both of them, and I hadn't talked to them in a long time. So we get to his door, and he opens it, and that's when the smell of a rotten meat locker pours out. A horrible smell just hits my nostrils. The place is a wreck. There's stuff everywhere. Everything is coated in dust, and nothing looks clean. Laundry is everywhere. There are no lights on, and it's just a mess. I ask, what happened here? And he just grunted, a really weird, almost guttural grunt. So I ask after Lisa, and she yelled from the kitchen. She was just behind a wall facing the room, but the wall wasn't a full wall, like with the top touching the ceiling, so I could smell something cooking. I walked into the kitchen expecting to see Lisa making some normal food, and I planned on asking Lisa why Danny was acting weird. But instead, what I saw is unforgettable. She was standing in the kitchen, naked, covered in blood, cooking some kind of mango mess, surrounded by thousands of bones. I was just smart enough to notice a pile of collars in the corner, like actual pet collars. I screamed, and that's when Danny lunged at me. I kind of sidestepped away from him and ran out the door. Danny gave chase after me, and I got to the car and noped out as fast as I could. I got home, called the police, and gave the address. Then I went straight to my dad. He punched me in the face and overheard the conversation with the police, especially when I gave the address. I tried to apologize, and he just yelled at me. He then hit me again and then hugged me and said he was so sorry. I tried to ask him, but he rather strongly told me to shut up about it and forget about it. The police then came to my house and told me they didn't find anyone living there, but my story matched the description of an absolute nightmare. They told me that they suspected that the previous owners left and that a mixture of wild animals and homeless people had been living there. My dad, being the genius that he is, asked why the house hadn't been closed off or why the bill payments hadn't been an issue. The police would stammer and said that they would look into it. Apparently, Danny's father had still been paying for it all, as per some agreement when they got married. I still hadn't seen them since then, and my dad has only told me the story once beforehand. My meeting up with Danny was pure coincidence, and only made the story much worse. A couple of years after all that happened, me and my dad got very drunk together. Then, in a drunken state, he told me the story and what happened to Danny. He said he knew what they were, but in my opinion, better Danny than my dad. Don't play with the fire, the locals in Romania used to say. I didn't understand it at first, even though I knew they are very superstitious people. I'm a construction engineer, and I've been recently sent to Romania with the company for a big contract that we won, the construction of a 27 floors building of business offices. I arrived at Bucharest Friday, and the project was set to begin Monday, so I had the weekend for myself. I wanted to visit the city, have some fun, since it was my first time in Romania, but I didn't know anyone. My colleague Kevin was going to get here on Saturday, and the other members of the team had the flights booked on Sunday. It was 6 p.m. I was in my hotel room when the phone rang. It was Kevin. Hey man, how is it there? Tell me the first impression. Hey Kev, I don't really know yet. I mean, the city looks nice, but I haven't been anywhere yet. I'm still in the room. I wish I knew someone to go out tonight with, have a couple of beers, but I guess I'll have to wait for you tomorrow. I don't like going out alone. Why don't you try to hang out with some locals? Kevin asked. And how do you expect me to do that? Go to random strangers and ask them to hang out with me? I laughed. Try the local Reddit. Go and create a post. Just say that you're new in town and if there's anyone who would want to go out for a beer or something. You know what? I think I'll do that. I'll test the beer for you. And tomorrow when we go out, I'll know which one is good. Well, I gotta go. See you tomorrow. I got off the phone, opened my laptop and headed onto Reddit. I created a post. Hey everyone, I just arrived for the first time in Bucharest, and I was wondering if there's someone willing to show me around, go out for a beer. By the way, I don't speak Romanian, so it would be nice if you spoke English too. A few replies came, welcoming me to the city, wishing me a pleasant stay, and stuff like that. And then the following reply came. Hey man, we're a bunch of Reddit friends who frequently go out for beer, and we actually have scheduled a meeting tonight. You can join us if you like. DM me for more details. I clicked on the account. I reviewed it a bit, and I found out that this guy was mostly interested in cats, technology, and cooking. I sent him a DM telling him that I would like to join them, and to give me some details about where we would be going and when to meet. He responded with the name of a bar, which looked pretty nice from the pictures on Google, and to be there outside at 9 p.m. Then he sent me his phone number. It was already 7:30 p.m. by now, so I jumped in the shower, got dressed and called an Uber. I got to the location 10 minutes earlier, and I saw about 5 guys around their 20s waiting outside. I took my phone out and called the number that he sent me. Then I saw one of the guys picking up his phone and answering. I'm here. I think I see you, I said, a bit confused, because this could also just been a coincidence of timing and phone calls. He looked around, fixed his eyes on me and said, yeah, that's us, man. Come on over. I always been an extrovert. However, meeting a new group of foreign guys made me a bit nervous. I walked to them. Hey guys, I'm Ross. Nice to meet you. Hey Ross, I'm Andre, the guy that I spoke on the phone with said. Then he pointed to the other guys and said, this is Mihai, Dan, Angelo, and Bogdan. We headed inside, got ourselves a table and ordered some beers. The guy seemed curious about me and made me feel like the center of attention, but not in a weird or awkward way. I found out that they are all students on different colleges and they all met on the local Reddit some years ago and became friends. Angelo was studying to become a doctor. Mihai was passionate about music, and he also had 2 rap songs already. Bogdan was a very dedicated gamer, which made him skip most of his classes and had to repeat the last year of college. This actually made me laugh. Dan was trying to become a bodybuilder, and that was a visible theme. I told him about myself, what I do for a living, about the project that we're about to start, and about my passion for the paranormal. Well, if you like paranormal, we have a haunted lake here. It's close by. It's called the Witch's Pond, Angelo said. After a short pause, he continued. It's also said that at night, witches are casting spells, and if you go there, bad things will happen. Not even the animals are drinking from it. Really, I always been excited about stories with haunted places, but I never got the chance to visit one. So where is it at exactly? I asked. You wanna go there? Bogdan asked. Andrei just chuckled, put his beer on the table and said, it's about 15 kilometers outside of Bucharest, located in the middle of a forest. If I think about it, we lived our whole lives here, but never thought about going there. What do you guys think? Should we go there after we finish the beers? My first thought was not to go into a forest outside of Bucharest with some guys that I just met 2 hours ago. But after a bit of consideration, these guys looked nice and harmless, and I didn't feel any threat around them. Plus, I always wanted to visit a haunted place. Well, let's do it, I said firmly, the alcohol starting to kick in by this moment. Should we call an Uber, or how do we get there? Let's pay the bill and call for an Uber. We paid for the beers, went outside while Bogdan was on the Uber app, trying to set the destination point to the Witch's Pond, close as possible. He had to do it manually since there was no exact address. The Uber will be here in 3 minutes, guys. I requested for 2 cars since it's 6 of us, Bogdan said. It was dark, and I felt so excited for what I was gonna do. My whole life was just playing, work, home, occasional nights out, but for the first time in my life, I was gonna do something like this. Something I always wanted. I could feel the adrenaline rushing through my body. The cars arrived and I got into a car with Andrei and Angelo, while Bogdan, Mihai, and Dan got into the second car. The Uber driver looked a bit suspicious, and even with fear, when he saw the destination point. And while noticing this, Andrei assured him we're only some drunk guys trying to have some fun, and also visit the said haunted place, and that he doesn't need to worry about it. We arrived after 20 minutes and got out of the car. It was pitch black, and the headlights were the only source of light out there. The second car arrived about 1 minute later, being delayed due to catching a red light behind us. We all gathered together and turned on the flashlights of our phone. Mihai then said, we should enter the forest from the other side of the road and walk straight for 2 minutes. Then we should reach the Witch's Pond. At least that's what it says on Google. It was cold outside, and a very deep silence, the type of silence that doesn't feel right. Mihai went first. We followed. We climbed a small cliff and entered the forest. We made our way to the Witch's Pond, walking over dead branches, and the leaves brought a bit of sound in the silence that we were surrounded of. After about 1 minute of walking through the forest, the wind started to blow, and all of a sudden, Mihai starts screaming, holy fuck guys, stop, it's a dead deer over here. A strong rotten smell hit me. I wanted to puke. The wind was now blowing the smell right towards us. We bypassed it holding our breath, and while I got next to it, I took a glance at the deer. Something was off. It didn't look like she died from an animal attack, or being shot by some hunter. It had no visible wounds. And even though it smelled so bad, it didn't look like it was in the decomposing stage yet. I got down to my knees and saw her eyes, wide open, the marks of blood pouring out from her eyes. I put my hand on her neck, and that's what shocked me. It was still warm. Her whole body was still warm. I couldn't understand why there was already the smell present, if the deer had just died. I thought it should be another dead body around, and that the smell was not coming from this deer, so I took a breath of air. The previous smell was 10 times stronger now, and I cannot explain what I felt. I can only say that it was the most awful feeling I had ever felt. At the beginning, I felt a very strong wave of fear going through my body. I wanted to leave, but now my legs were weak, and I felt like I couldn't stand up. My vision started to get blurry, and before I knew it, Andrei grabbed my arm and helped me to stand up. What are you still doing here? I had to come back for you. We didn't even notice when you were left behind. How can you stay in this smell? He asked. There's something very wrong with this deer, I said. Even if it smells like it was decomposing for a few days, it just died. I just put my hand on its body and it's still warm. That's impossible. Your mind is playing tricks. There's no way that her body is still warm. You felt that rotten smell. It has at least 3 days since she died, Andre replied. Let's go. The boys are waiting for us, he continued. We headed back to the group and kept going. The air started to feel heavy, and the cold was getting colder with how much we advanced towards the pond. We got to a zone where the trees stopped, and we found ourselves in a small, circular area with a pond in the center. The vegetation seemed dead all over the place. The pond had a greenish color, the color of a sick water. The whole place looked so unnatural. I turned off the light of my phone, opened the camera and took a picture of it. It was my first official visit to a haunted place, so I had to have a memory of it. Alright then, there's no witches here, Angelo said. Mihai, take a picture of me in front of the lake. Angelo headed towards the lake and turned his back towards it. You're too close. Go a bit more near the lake, Mihai said. Angelo took a few steps behind, and he ended up stepping, I assume, on a moist piece of mud. That it scared him that he jumped a few steps behind and landed in the water. Now my feet are not only muddy, but also wet. Angelo had a mad expression on his face while getting out of the pond, shaking his feet which were pouring out water. And by the look of that water, you're gonna stink as well. All I know is that I'm not sharing the Uber with you on the way back, I said, semi-chuckling. By that time, he didn't even want to take the photo anymore, and he came back to us. Dan, being amused by the whole situation, said, why don't we sing something? In case there are some nearby animals, we'll scare them and leave the area. I nodded. It felt like a good idea to keep us safe from any stray dogs, or possibly even a wolf. Yeah, that's a good idea. We could do that for a minute, then go back to the main road and call for a cab, I said. I don't know any Romanian songs, but I can be the judge to see who's the best singer. The guys agreed on the song, and they all started singing all at once. They were a terrible bunch of untalented drunk guys singing, and it was hilarious. I listened carefully, holding on to my promise and nominate one winner, when all of a sudden, I started hearing a great singing voice. The voice was pure. It was music to my ears. And that's when it hit me. It was a girl's voice. A few seconds later, my new friends heard it too, and they stopped singing as they noticed. It was starting now to accelerate and change the tone from a sweet one to an angry and fast-paced flow, and it seemed like it was coming from all around us. Then, the forest was hit by a hard wind, waving all the trees, and the voice was starting to sound louder and louder. The song now was changed to what sounded like a Latin language, if anything, like an incantation. The bushes around us started to move more. The leaves were flying in the wind. The wind was blowing so hard now, but the voice was still clear as before. That's when Angelo fell on his knees, with the head against his chest, and started shouting, Nex adum immortales libres poneo nex al bioconanum aberto pirium contio sanus es pracumanus. A strong smell of rot appeared, just like the one I sensed on the deer, and it smelled like it was coming from him. The voice now started to shout the same thing as Angelo, and I needed no invitation to get the fuck out of there. I ran as fast as I could, in the same direction that I thought we came from, barely seeing in front of me and hoping that I wouldn't run into a tree. The guys followed as I heard them running and screaming behind me. A feeling of cold and a deep sleepiness took over me, but I had to fight it, to remain focused and get the fuck out of that forest as fast as possible. The voice was still everywhere, as loud as before, but the wind started to blow even more. I was practically running as fast as my body could, and I was jumping over dead tree trunks, looking left and right to see if there's anything in the woods. But there was nothing that can be seen at least. I saw in front of me about 50 meters or so, the tree line ending, and I knew I headed the right way, and I'm almost out. I looked behind me and saw Mihai around 5 meters behind me, and Dan and Bogdan around 30 meters behind us, still running towards us. We're almost out, I screamed to the boys. A very loud crack sounded in front of us. The sound scared me and I tripped. I got back up a few seconds and kept running. That's when a big tree fell in front of me and just missed me by a few meters. It was an old tree, at least 300 years old, and it just broke in half. By this moment, Dan and Bogdan got to us, and we continued to run. We're practically seeing the road by now. A few more seconds passed and we left the woods, reaching the main road. The voice was gone by now, and the wind was not blowing any longer. The air started to feel normal as well. I sat down on the road, breathing real heavy. I looked at the guys. Everyone was terrified. No one could say anything. Mihai took out his phone, opened the cab app, enabled his location, and got us a car. We sat in silence waiting, and after about 20 minutes, the cab finally got there. We went inside and sat quietly the whole ride. I wanted to say something, but I couldn't. I just didn't know what to say. When we arrived in town, we headed straight to the police and told them what happened. And we also told them that Angelo was left behind. Of course, they didn't believe us, but they went to investigate. On the second day, I saw it on the news. 23-year-old guy found on the witch's pond. The cause of death, a heart attack. That's when my phone rang. It was Kevin. I answered. Hey Kev, I just landed here. I'm waiting for a cab to get me to the hotel. Can you send me the address again? I somehow lost it. I'll send you a shared location right away, Kev. By the way, I almost forgot. The phone exploded with static. I looked at my screen, and it now showed a phone number that I didn't recognize. After a few seconds of static, I heard a very low voice, but I couldn't understand anything. I put my phone on speaker mode and pressed the volume up to the max. When I heard it, I froze. It said, Next adum immortales libres poneo next avio tunanum aberto vivium contio samus es fracumanus. My great-grandparents, they were never forced to go to residential boarding schools. You know, those that took so many others away from their traditions. And because of this, they were able to hold on to a lot of their old ways, a lot of their traditions, and that's how they grew up. They lived deep in the mountains, far from the influence of outside beliefs or cultures. And that's why our family believes that their connection to these teachings, these traditions, actually protected a lot of our family. So I got a story to tell you. One that's been passed down from my mom and others about something they experienced a long time ago. My mom, when she was just a girl, she lived with my grandparents in a hole-gone way out in the middle of nowhere. Life on the rest back then was so tough and lonely. They didn't have the things that we have now. No electricity, no running water, and definitely not a single road. If you wanted to get somewhere, you traveled by horse or wagon, and even then, it took a whole day just to reach the nearest trading post. Some of the winters were long, and everyone had to work together to survive. Each day was a routine, herding the sheep, gathering firewood, and making sure that the hold-on stayed warm. My grandpa was well known across the reservation as a traditional medicine man. People from all over would seek him to perform ceremonies. He actually taught my mom a lot about our traditions, and she always felt a sense of security around him. Like he always had the right words to say to make you feel protected. My grandma was even more practical. She was strong, and she was never scared so easy. Even though she was blind from scarlet fever, she never let that slow her down. She knew how to take care of her family, and her presence actually made my mom feel safe, no matter what. One day, my mom and her uncle were told to herd the sheep like always. They were young and liked to mess around, playing with the sheepdog while they were supposed to be working. The sun was already starting to set as they headed back home, and the cold air began to settle in. The land was quiet, almost too quiet, and something about it felt strange, as my mom said. As they were walking, they started hearing this noise behind them. It sounded like a horse that was following them, but every time they turned around, There was nothing, just trees swaying a little bit in the wind and the bushes rustling, but they couldn't shake the feeling that something was there, lurking just out of sight. The further they walked, the more the air felt heavy. Everything was quiet, almost like something was gonna happen. My mom then said that she felt a coldness creeping up her spine, and even the sheep seemed to get nervous, almost like they were sensing something. The sound of their footsteps in the light snow seemed too loud, echoing through all the silence. It was starting to get dark fast. As they neared the corral, the smell hit them, a thick, rotting stench like something was dead. They hurried up to close up the corral and rushed back inside the hogan. But my grandma noticed right away that a few sheep were missing. She then came inside the hogan and handed my mom and her uncle flashlights, and she sent them back out to find the stragglers. I guess my grandma knew that since they liked to play with the sheepdog and be distracted, she figured they lost them on the way here. So she came inside the hogan and handed my mom and her uncle flashlights and sent them back out to find the stragglers. The snow started falling again, and the wind was picking up, making it difficult to see. My mom was actually good at seeing in the dark, but her uncle wasn't so lucky. As they walked through the snow, they kept hearing it again, that same sound, almost like a horse galloping behind them, staying just out of sight. The smell was back as well, but stronger now, as if whatever was following them was getting closer. The cold stung their faces and the snow muffled everything else, making the sound of that horse even louder. They did end up finding the missing sheep, along with a newborn lamb, and so they headed back. My mom and her uncle took turns carrying it, and on the way back, the smell was getting worse. Her uncle was too scared to say anything, and again, every time they looked back, nothing was there. They hurried back to the corral, herding the remaining sheep inside, but as they were closing up, my mom said that they felt like somebody was watching them. When they got back to the hogan, my grandma was waiting for them, but she knew something was wrong. The sheepdog were nowhere to be found, which was strange. They always stayed close by, and my mom figured her grandpa was still out doing a ceremony, since he often got called away for his medicine work. When they got back to the hogan, my grandma was waiting for them. The sheepdog were nowhere to be found, and even my grandpa wasn't there. Now the sheepdog situation was strange. They always stayed close by. After dinner, my grandma asked my mom and her uncle to take some extra milk out to the lambs. The snow had already stopped falling, and it was still quiet outside, but not in a peaceful way. It was too quiet. As they walked towards the corral, they opened up the door, and when they did, that's when they saw two big animals sitting in between the sheep. They weren't acting like animals though. They were just there sitting, talking, speaking. My mom simply described them as big dogs that were just sitting across from each other. My mom's uncle froze, too terrified to move. He just stood there, staring at these animals back in shock. My mom, sensing something was very wrong, pulled them away and they ran back to the hogan. When they got inside, she told my grandma what they had seen. Her uncle still couldn't speak, too shaken by what he had just witnessed. My grandma, who wasn't one to back down from anything, she wasn't about to let something mess with her sheep or her family. My mom followed her back to the corral, moving carefully through the snow. The two dogs were still there, still sitting among the sheep, and still talking. My grandma aimed the rifle at them, and the moment that they heard the click of the gun, they started moving. My grandma was able to fire and hit one of them, and it let out this awful scream. They were still able to get away through the back door, running away on all fours. Yenagloshis, my grandma said, her voice steady but grim. My mom couldn't believe it. This was the first time she saw one of them. Her family had told her about them, but she had never seen one of them before. Later that night, in the Hogan, they started hearing the same sound as earlier, the sound of horses running outside. When my grandpa finally got home, we told him everything. The next morning, he decided to track these dogs himself. He followed the tracks for most of the day, carefully analyzing all the signs and tracks they left behind. He saw that the tracks were strange, like part human, part animal, leading him through snow-covered land. Along the way, he noticed that some of the things were off. Ravens were circling in the sky, making all sorts of noises. He said that these were signs from the land itself that something unnatural had passed through, almost like a warning. The tracks eventually led him to a small town. When I say town, I don't mean like a populated city or anything. Just a close community with a few hogans and stores and stuff. He was stopping at every hogan and vendor, well, every stand, and talking to the people there. He said that at one specific stand, there was a man that was sitting behind it. The man who lived there was old and knew my grandpa. When my grandpa got there, the man was sitting in the corner, barely moving, with his leg wrapped up. His wife, who was actually the one selling things, said that he had been injured recently, but she didn't say how. My grandpa didn't ask any questions. He already knew. The talk was that the old man got better for a while, but he eventually died a year later while sleeping. As far as the other dog goes, he was never found. To this day, we're told that if you ever find out who the Skinwalker is, that person is supposed to die right away or within a year from the same date of the event. It's creepy, but my mom has so many other stories like this, and you have to be on the reservation to experience them.